Nora Carter did not scream when Silas Knox closed his hand around her throat. She stared straight into his eyes. That was the moment the Copper Bell Saloon stopped breathing 40 men, 24 glasses, one hanging lantern swinging slow overhead, and not a single soul moved to help her. She felt the cartilage in her neck strain, felt the room blur at the edges, felt her boots lift a quarter-inch off the hardwood floor. And she did not look away from the man who was killing her. If you have ever stood alone in a room full of people who chose silence, you already know what that moment costs a woman. Stay with me, subscribe to this channel and follow Nora's story to the very end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let us begin. The night Silas Knox walked into the Copper Bell, Nora had already counted every man in the room twice. It was a habit she'd built over 11 years of running the saloon alone, scanning faces, reading posture, noting who had too much whiskey, and who was nursing a grievance older than the glass in their hand. Her late husband Thomas had taught her the arithmetic of a room. Thomas was 3 years in the ground, and Nora had been running the arithmetic herself ever since. Knox entered without announcement. That was the first thing she noticed. Most men who meant trouble came in loud, wanted witnesses to their own authority. Knox came in quiet, which meant he already had authority and didn't need to perform it. He was wide through the shoulder, narrow through the eye, and he wore his hat pulled just low enough that you had to look twice to read his face. He moved through the crowd the way a stone moves through water, parting it without caring what it displaced. He sat at the bar. He did not order. Nora was behind the counter working the ledger she kept beneath the register. She had 3 columns active, a disputed payment from a supply run out of Colton Creek, and a pencil worn down to the brass ferrule. She looked up once when Knox sat down. He looked back at her with the flat expression of a man who had already decided how the evening would end. "You Nora Carter," he said. "I am," she said. "You want a drink or a conversation?" "Neither," he said. "I want you to sign a document." She set the pencil down. She did not close the ledger. "Then you want the wrong woman." He reached inside his coat and produced an envelope thick and sealed with red wax. He slid it across the bar. She looked at it without touching it. "Harold Vance sends his regards," Knox said. The room did not change. The music from the upright piano in the corner kept playing a slow and threadbare waltz that Abel Pike picked out with 2 fingers because he'd never properly learned. The card tables kept their rhythm, but something altered in the quality of the air, the way temperature drops just before a storm finds its shape. Nora knew Harold Vance. Every business owner in Redstone Flats knew Harold Vance. He was not the kind of man who sent regards, he sent terms. She picked up the envelope. She opened it. She read it once, then again, and on the second reading she understood the full shape of what she was holding. It was a debt claim. It cited a promissory note dated 6 years back, allegedly signed by Thomas Carter, her deceased husband, for an amount that would, if enforced, require surrender of the property deed to satisfy the balance. The document was notarized. It had a county seal. It looked at a casual glance entirely legitimate. She set it back on the bar. "This note is dated February of 1861, she said. "That's correct," Knox said. "Thomas and I didn't acquire this property until March of 1863, she said, "which means this debt was issued against a property my husband didn't yet own." Knox's expression did not change. "Sign the document, Mrs. Carter." "Get out of my saloon," she said. He came over the bar. Not slowly, not with warning. He came over it the way a man comes over something he has already decided is not an obstacle. His hand found her throat before she could move, and he lifted her just enough that her boot heels grazed the floorboards, and he held her there against the back shelf, with the bottles rattling and the room going absolutely catastrophically still. She heard the piano stop. She heard chairs scrape back. She heard the sound of men who had decided collectively, and in the same instant, to become invisible. Her hands went to his wrist. Not clawing, she was past panic already somewhere else, somewhere cold and calculating beneath the fear. She kept her eyes on his face. She memorized it. The scar along his jaw, the yellowing of the left eye's sclera, the way his jaw clenched when he applied pressure. She memorized every detail like a woman who intended to use it later. "Sign the document," Knox said low and even. "Or the next time I come back, it won't be a conversation." He let her go. She dropped a full inch to the floor, caught the shelf, and stayed upright through an act of will that cost her more than she would ever admit to any living soul. Her throat burned. Her vision was still soft at the edges. She stood straight. "Get out," she said. Her voice did not shake. Knox adjusted his coat, picked up the envelope from where it had fallen, and set it deliberately on the bar top. "Mr. Vance will expect an answer by Friday," he said. Then he walked back through the crowd, which parted for him the same way it had when he arrived, and he left. The door swung shut behind him. For a moment, nobody spoke. 40 people, and nobody spoke. Then Abel Pike started playing the piano again, one note at a time, as if testing whether the room still worked that way. Nora turned around, took a clean glass from the shelf, poured herself 2 fingers of whiskey, and drank it standing. She did not look at the room. She did not want to see the faces of men who had watched and done nothing. She had lived among them long enough to understand it. Fear was a reasonable response, and Harold Vance was a reasonable thing to fear, but understanding it and accepting it were 2 different mathematics entirely. She picked up the envelope. She carried it to her office at the back of the saloon, sat down at her desk, and read it a 3rd time, then a 4th. She went through it the way she went through every financial document, slowly looking not for what it said, but for what it was trying to hide. The promissory note was forged. She was certain of that within the first 20 minutes of real examination. The date alone was enough to invalidate it in any court that respected property records, but there were subtler problems too. The handwriting that allegedly belonged to Thomas was close, but not precise. Thomas had written with a leftward lean when he was tired, and a rightward lean when he was being formal. This signature leaned uniformly right throughout, which meant whoever had copied it had worked from a single sample and not understood the man's variation. The county seal had a double impression, the kind that happened when a stamp was pressed twice instead of once, which suggested it had been applied to an already completed document, rather than to fresh paper in a clerk's office. Somebody had spent real money on this forgery. That meant the stakes were real. She was still sitting there with the document when she heard the shot outside a single report, not close, somewhere toward the far end of the street. Then, voices low and quick. Then boots on the boardwalk. The front door opened. She heard it from the office. She heard Abel's voice. "Can I help you, mister?" She heard nothing in response. She heard the particular quality of silence that meant the room had changed again. She came out of the office with her hand near the short-barreled Colt she kept on her hip, a habit Thomas had insisted upon, and one she'd never abandoned. What she found was a man standing just inside the door, still the way men stand when they are making a decision about what to do with their hands. He was lean, dark-coated, carrying road dust on him like a second skin. The revolver at his hip was visible but holstered. His eyes moved through the room once the way a man scans a room he's already half read before he walked in. He saw Nora, and he looked at her throat. She saw him look at it, and she did not flinch. "Saloon's open," she said. "You want a drink? Find a seat." "I want to understand what I walked into," he said. His voice was low, not rough, measured in the way of men who had learned to spend words carefully. He had a stillness about him that was different from Knox's stillness. Knox had been still like a hammer is still before it falls. This man was still like a coiled thing that had decided to wait. "You walked into a business that's had a difficult evening," Nora said. "It's been resolved." "Has it?" he said. It wasn't a question. "I don't believe we've met," she said. "Cole Maddox," he said. He didn't offer a hand. Neither did she. The name moved through the room in that almost invisible way that names sometimes do not loud enough to constitute a reaction, but present enough to register. Abel's hands paused over the piano keys for half a beat before resuming. 2 men at the nearest card table exchanged a look too brief to read. Nora read it anyway. "Sit down, Mr. Maddox," she said. "I'll pour you a drink." He sat at the bar, not at the stool Knox had occupied. He chose the one at the far end with his back to the wall and a clear angle on the door. She noted it. She noted it the way she noted everything. She poured him whiskey. She poured herself a second glass she hadn't planned on, and stood across the bar from him. "The man who was here before me," Cole said. "Was that Knox?" "You know him?" she said. "I know who he works for." She held the glass without drinking. "Then you know more than most people in this town who pretend otherwise." "Harold Vance sent him with a contract," Cole said. "You were watching the saloon. I was across the street. Couldn't hear. But I know Knox's work." He paused. "He put his hands on you." "He did," she said. He looked at her for a moment with something in his face that wasn't pity. She would have refused pity, but was something more precise. Assessment, maybe. Or recognition. "What did the contract say?" he asked. She thought about telling him it was none of his business. She also thought about the fact that she was alone in a town of silent men with a forged document on her desk and a bruise forming around her larynx, and that the man across from her had correctly identified Knox by sight from across a dark street, which meant he understood the particular geography she was standing in. She went to the office. She came back with the envelope. She slid it across to him. He read it the way she had carefully without rushing. He turned the pages. He held the promissory note up toward the light. "The date's wrong," he said. "By 2 years," she said. "The seal's been applied twice," he said. "I noticed that too." He set it down. He looked at her. "You're not going to sign this." "I am not." "Then Vance is going to escalate," he said. "Knox coming in here was the first move, the ask. When you refuse the ask, the next move is pressure. That's how Vance works. Ask, then pressure, then destruction." "I'm familiar with the pattern," she said. "I'm also familiar with county property records, chain of title documentation, and the particular inconsistencies in this notarization that a circuit court judge would find instructive." He was quiet for a moment. "You've done this before. I've kept this business alive for 11 years by knowing exactly what I own and exactly what can be proven," she said. "Vance didn't send that document because he thinks it'll hold up in court. He sent it hoping I'd panic and settle. That's a very different strategy." "And if he decides the courts aren't worth the trouble," Cole said. "If he decides it's cheaper to burn the building than to litigate." She hadn't looked away from him once during this conversation. She didn't look away now. "Then I'll need to move faster than he does," she said. Cole picked up his glass. He drank. He set it down. "I'm staying in town for a few days," he said. "Hadn't planned on longer." "Plans change," Nora said. "They do," he said. He looked at the door, then back at her. "I'll be around tomorrow." "I open at 10, she said. "Coffee's better than the whiskey." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. More like the acknowledgement that a smile was a possibility in a world that still contained this particular conversation. He left. Nora stood at the bar for a long moment after the door swung shut. The room had exhaled. She could hear it, the deliberate loosening of men who had been holding themselves against the possibility of further incident. She looked at none of them. She took the forged document back to her office. She sat at her desk. She pulled out a clean sheet of paper and began writing the date. The anomalies, the promissory note's mathematical impossibility. She wrote in the precise and unornamented hand that Thomas had always called her best quality. He had meant it as warmth. She had always taken it as fact. Harold Vance wanted the copper bell. He had decided it was his. He had sent a man to hurt her in front of witnesses who chose not to witness, and he had dressed his theft in the language of law because he understood that legality was a costume that frightened most people into compliance. Nora had spent 11 years learning that the costume had seams. You only had to know where to pull. She kept writing. Across town in the back room of the land office he'd leased for the season, Harold Vance sat across from a man from the railroad company whose name Nora Carter did not yet know. They were looking at a map. The map had lines on it. Survey lines, property boundaries, the projected route of a spur line that would need to cross under a particular piece of land in Redstone Flats to access mineral deposits that the railroad had been quietly acquiring rights to for the better part of 2 years. The particular piece of land the spur line required was the Copper Bell Saloon. She refused, Vance said. The railroad man folded his hands. That's unfortunate. It's a temporary condition, Vance said. Knox will go back. Mr. Vance, the railroad man said, we have a timeline. The board approved the route on the condition that the land rights were secured by the 1st of October. That is 11 weeks from now. I would appreciate a more concrete solution than Knox going back. Vance looked at the map. She's a woman alone in a frontier town with no legal representation and no men willing to back her play, he said. She'll break. In the back office of the Copper Bell Saloon, Nora Carter was on her second sheet of paper. She was not breaking. She was building. Abel Pike knocked on the doorframe at 11:30. He was 24, sharp-faced, with ink permanently staining his right index finger from the account books he kept for her. He had been with her 3 years. He was the closest thing to an ally she had inside these walls, which was not a comfortable thought, but was an honest one. You all right, Mrs. Carter? He said. Close the door, Abel, she said. Sit down. I need you to go to the county clerk's office first thing in the morning and pull the original property filing for this address, the 1863 deed. Don't ask for a copy. Ask to see the original. Take your time with it. He sat. You think the deed's been tampered with? I think Vance may have been working on multiple fronts, she said. The promissory note is forged. I can prove that. But if he's also filed supplementary documents with the county, I need to know before he can use them. And if he has, she looked at the paper in front of her. Then we pull every thread until the whole thing unravels, she said. That's how you beat a fraud, Abel. You don't fight it head on. You document it. You source it. You present it to someone who is required by office to care about the truth. She paused. We're going to need a judge. Abel was quiet. The circuit judge doesn't come through Redstone Flats until September, he said. That's 6 weeks. Then we have 6 weeks to build a case that he cannot dismiss, she said. Go home. Sleep. Be at the clerk's office when it opens. He stood, hesitated at the door. That man who came in tonight, he said. Maddox. What about him? People say he's trouble. People say a lot of things, Nora said. In my experience, the ones they call trouble are often just men who don't observe the same silences as everyone else. She picked up her pencil. Good night, Abel. He left. Nora sat alone in the back office of the Copper Bell, the bruise settling into her throat, the lamp burning low. The forged document and her own notes spread across the desk in 2 parallel columns. Vance's lie and her unraveling of it, laid out side by side. She was not afraid. She had moved past fear in the moment Knox's hand had closed around her throat, and she had refused to look away. What was left after fear, she had learned, was something cleaner. Something that did not require comfort or reassurance or the sound of another human being telling her it would be all right. What was left was the work. She turned to a fresh page. She began to write again. The lamp burned through the night. Outside, Redstone Flats went quiet, the way frontier towns go quiet, not peaceful, but exhausted. The kind of quiet that holds its breath. And somewhere on the dark end of the main street, in a room above the feed store that he'd rented for 2 bits a night, Cole Maddox sat by the window with his boots on and his revolver on the table and watched the light burning in the back window of the Copper Bell Saloon. He watched it for a long time. He had known Harold Vance's work in 3 other towns before this one. He had seen what happened when the pressure moved from the ask to the next stage, what it looked like when a man with money and lawyers and hired muscle decided that a single woman's refusal was an inconvenience to be removed rather than a position to be respected. He had ridden into Redstone Flats for his own reasons. He had not intended to stay, but there was a light burning in the back of that saloon, and the woman who had been choked in front of 40 silent witnesses was sitting behind it alone, doing the only thing that might actually save her, not praying, not weeping, not waiting for someone else to act. Writing it down. He picked up his revolver. He checked the cylinder out of habit, then set it back on the table. He would be at the Copper Bell when it opened at 10. He reckoned the coffee could wait if necessary. What he was less certain could wait was whatever Harold Vance was planning for the morning after a refusal, because in Cole's experience, men like Vance did not sleep on a no. They sharpened themselves against it. And when they came back, they did not come back alone. Cole Maddox was at the Copper Bell at 9:47. Nora knew because she had been watching the street from the side window since 9:30. Not because she was waiting for him specifically, but because she had spent the night building a case against Harold Vance. And she intended to know the exact moment anything on that street moved differently than it should. He came from the north end on foot, no horse visible, which told her he'd stabled the animal somewhere other than the obvious livery, a man who thought about exits before he thought about comfort. He wore the same dark coat as the night before. He moved at the same unhurried pace that was somehow faster than it looked. She had the coffee ready. He came in, sat at the same end of the bar as before, and accepted the cup without ceremony. He drank it black. She noted that too. "You sleep," he said. "Some," she said. It was not entirely a lie. She had slept for 2 hours on the cot in the back office and woken with the lamp still burning and 4 pages of documented inconsistencies in Harold Vance's fraudulent claim spread across her desk. Enough, he said. She refilled his cup without asking. "I need to tell you something about this contract," she said. "And I need you to tell me what you know about Vance before I decide how much of it matters." He looked at her over the rim of the cup. "That's a fair trade," he said. She came around the bar and sat across from him at the nearest table, the forged document between them. "The promissory note is dated February 1861, she said. "Thomas and I took deed of this property in March of 1863. That's the first error, and it's large enough to invalidate the contract on its own in front of any judge who bothers to check the county filing." She tapped the page. "But Vance isn't stupid. He wouldn't send Knox in here with a single weak document unless he believed he had something else in reserve." "He does," Cole said. He set down the cup. He folded his hands on the table. "Vance has been filing supplementary land claims in 3 counties over the past 18 months. Colton Creek, Mesa Verde, and here. He acquires a fraudulent debt claim, files it with a sympathetic county clerk, and then uses the filed document as the foundation for a second filing that transfers provisional mineral rights to an outside party, usually a railroad or a mining company, before the original owner even knows the process is started." He paused. "By the time the owner finds out, there are 2 layers of legal paperwork standing between them and their own property." The room had not opened yet. It was just the 2 of them, and the early light and the smell of coffee going cold. Nora sat very still. "He's already sold the mineral rights," she said. "Almost certainly," Cole said. "The question is whether he filed the second transfer before or after Knox came to you last night. If it's before, you're not just fighting a forged debt note, you're fighting a railroad's legal claim to your subsurface rights, and railroad lawyers make Vance look like a county fair trick." Nora stood up. She walked to the door of her office and came back with the notes she'd made through the night. She spread them on the table next to the forged document. "Then I need to see the county records today," she said. "Not tomorrow. Today." "I figured," Cole said. "That's why I'm here at 9:47 instead of 10. She looked at him. He looked back. Something passed between them that was not warmth exactly, but was something in the same territory. Recognition, maybe. The specific recognition of 2 people who have both learned to move faster than the trouble behind them. "Abel's already at the clerk's office," she said. "Is he someone Vance can pressure?" The question landed cleanly without apology for its implication. She respected that. "Abel is 24 and loyal," she said. "Whether that holds under real pressure, I don't know yet. I'd rather not find out the hard way." "Then we shouldn't leave him there alone," Cole said. They left together. The Redstone Flats County Clerk's office occupied a narrow building between the post office and the assay office, and it smelled permanently of old paper and damp wood, and the particular mustiness of records that nobody consulted unless they had to. The clerk was a man named Gerald Potts, 60s, with the permanently startled expression of someone who had been interrupted mid-thought every day for 40 years and had never quite recovered. Abel was at the front counter when Nora and Cole walked in. He turned, and Nora read his face in the first half-second before he composed it. Something was wrong. "Mrs. Carter," he said. Mr. Potts was just explaining. "The 1863 property deed for the Copper Bell Saloon," Nora said to Potts directly. "I'd like to see the original filing." Potts adjusted his spectacles. "I was just telling your young man here, Mrs. Carter, that the original deed file is currently under administrative review." "Administrative review," Nora repeated. "Yes, ma'am. Routine matter. Shouldn't be more than a week or two." "Who requested the review?" Cole said from behind Nora's left shoulder. Potts looked at him the way people looked at Cole when they first registered the full dimensions of his presence, a quick recalibration of what kind of conversation this was going to be. "I'm not at liberty to say," Potts said. "Is that a policy?" Cole said, "or an instruction?" The distinction sat on the counter between them. Potts's startled expression became something more complicated. "It's a policy," he said, but he said it one beat too slow. Nora put both hands on the counter and leaned forward exactly far enough to communicate intention without aggression. "Mr. Potts," she said, "I have been a tax-paying property owner in this county for 11 years. That deed is a public record. Administrative review does not suspend public access to filed documents under county statute. It suspends alteration. Am I incorrect?" Potts opened his mouth, closed it. "You are technically not incorrect," he said. "Then I'd like to see it," she said. "Now please." He went to the back. He was gone for 4 minutes. Nora counted them, and when he returned, his expression had settled into the specific blankness of a man who had made a decision he was not comfortable with, and was committed to it anyway. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter," he said. "The file seems to have been temporarily misplaced during the review intake process." Abel made a small sound that was almost a word. Cole said nothing. He was watching Potts the way a man watches a door he expects to open unexpectedly. Nora straightened. She reached into her coat and produced a folded piece of paper, the 4th page of the notes she'd written through the night, the one that listed the statutory citations for public record access in the county. She unfolded it and set it on the counter. "I'll be back this afternoon with a written request citing chapter and verse," she said. "If the file is still misplaced at that time, I will be writing a letter to the State Land Commissioner's office by end of business today. That letter will note the date, the time, and the name of the clerk on duty." She picked the paper up. "Good morning, Mr. Potts." She walked out. Abel followed. Cole came last and he held the door, and as it closed, Nora heard Potts say something low and quick to himself that she didn't catch and didn't need to. On the boardwalk, Abel exhaled. "He was lying," he said. "Yes," Nora said. "The file's not misplaced. Somebody told him to keep us out." "Yes. So Vance already knows we're looking." "Vance knew the moment Knox left this saloon last night without a signed document," she said. "We were never going to have the element of surprise. What we have instead is documentation, and we need to move faster than he can suppress it." She was already walking back toward the Copper Bell. "Abel, I need you to go to every supply vendor who has transacted with this saloon in the past 3 years. I want copies of every invoice, every payment receipt, every signed delivery record that establishes the Copper Bell as an ongoing legal business entity under my name. Start with Hendricks at the dry goods store. He keeps good records." "That's going to take all day," Abel said. "Then don't stop for lunch," she said. He turned and went. She and Cole walked together back toward the saloon. He was quiet beside her, not the silence of a man with nothing to say, but the silence of a man choosing not to waste words. "He's moved faster than you expected," he said finally. "I underestimated how far along his filing was," she said. "I thought he was still in the acquisition phase. If the county file is already being managed, he may have already completed the mineral rights transfer." "Which means the railroad already has a stake," Cole said. "Which means the railroad is now a party to his fraud," she said. which is both worse and better than Vance operating alone. He looked at her sidelong. How is it better? Because railroad companies have boards and shareholders and attorneys who get very uncomfortable when the word fraud appears in proximity to their filed documents, she said. Vance is protected by fear. A railroad is protected by paperwork, and paperwork has edges. She pushed open the saloon door. I just need to find them. Dot Miller was inside sweeping. She was 61, gray-haired, built like a woman who had never once been talked into softening herself for other people's comfort. She had worked for Nora for 7 years and observed the world with the particular precision of someone who had survived long enough to stop being surprised by its worst qualities. She looked at Nora's throat. The bruise was more visible in daylight, a shadow along the left side of her neck, and then she looked away, which was her version of discretion. Abel's supply invoices are already in the back cabinet, she said. I pulled them this morning when I heard what happened last night. Nora stopped. You heard? Town this size, Dot said. I heard before I finished my breakfast. She kept sweeping. I also heard that Maddox over there stopped Knox from finishing what he started, so I made extra coffee. Cole looked at Dot. Dot looked back at him with the unimpressed steadiness of a woman who had seen every kind of man the frontier produced and categorized them accordingly. Whatever she found in his face, she appeared to provisionally accept it because she jerked her chin toward the bar and said, It's fresh. He went to get it. Nora went to the cabinet. The invoices were there, 4 years of them neatly stacked in the order Dot kept everything by date, then by vendor, then by amount. She began pulling them out, separating them into relevant and irrelevant, with the practiced speed of a woman who had been reading financial documents since before Thomas had ever trusted her with the books. She was on the third stack when Cole came back to the doorway of the office. Nora, he said. The use of her given name was the first time. She looked up. Knox is across the street, he said. He's been there about 5 minutes. He's not alone. She set the invoices down. She stood. She did not go to the window that would tell them she was watching, and she didn't want them to know that yet. How many? She said. 3 that I can see, he said. Could be more back of the building. Are they moving? Not yet. Watching. She thought for a moment. She thought about the invoices on her desk, and the county clerk with his blank expression, and the mineral rights that may already be filed against her property, and the 6 weeks until the circuit judge arrived in Redstone Flats. Then we let them watch, she said. Go back out front, sit at the bar, be visible. That's it. For now, she said. Vance wants me afraid. He wants me to make a move I haven't thought through because I'm panicking, so we don't panic. She sat back down. She picked up the invoice she'd been reading. We do the work. He looked at her for a moment with that same precise expression from the night before. Not admiration exactly, but something in the neighborhood of it. Then he went back to the bar. Dot appeared in the doorway where he'd been. You want me to take the back way to the telegraph office? She said. Nora looked up. Who do you know at the telegraph office? The girl who works the morning shift went to school with my niece, Dot said. And she's got a good memory for messages that come in from out of town. She paused. Messages from, say, a railroad office, for instance. Nora was quiet for 3 full seconds. Dot, she said. I'll be back in an hour, Dot said and was gone. The morning stretched. Knox and his men stayed across the street. Cole sat at the bar and drank coffee with the patience of a man who understood that waiting was its own kind of pressure. Nora worked through the invoices, building a timeline of business operations. Payments, made deliveries, received contracts signed under her name alone in the years since Thomas died, that established in aggregate what the fraudulent promissory note tried to deny, that Nora Carter was the sole and functioning owner of the Copper Bell Saloon, had been for years, and had the paper trail to prove it. At 11:30, 3 men came in. Not Knox's men, these were different. They wore town clothes, not trail clothes, which meant they were local, not imported muscle. One of them Nora recognized Hector Dumas, who owned the feed store 2 blocks north and had been a peripheral business acquaintance for most of her 11 years in Redstone Flats. The other two she knew by sight, but not by name, regular customers, men who had sat in her saloon and drunk her whiskey and said good evening, Mrs. Carter, when they left. They did not look comfortable coming in at this hour. Dumas came to the bar. He didn't sit. "Mrs. Carter," he said. "Got a minute?" She came out of the office. Cole was at the far end of the bar still. He didn't turn around. "Mr. Dumas," she said. "I'll be direct," Dumas said. He put his hat on the bar and looked at her throat and then looked at the wall behind her. "A few of us heard about what happened last night, and He paused. "We want you to know we're sorry for it." "Are you?" she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Were you here when it happened?" she said. He shifted his weight. "Some of us were, yes." "Were you among those who chose not to intervene?" she said. The word chose landed the way she had intended it to land, with weight, with specificity, with the implication that she understood exactly what had been made when those men had looked away. "Mrs. Carter." The second man said she thought his name was Reeves. "Knox is not a man you step in front of. It's not that nobody cared." "Mr. Reeves," she said, "I'm not here to adjudicate your choices from last night. I'm here to run my business. Was there something specific you came to say?" Dumas picked up his hat, put it back down. "Vance has been talking to some of the business owners," he said, "making arrangements. He's offering to buy out leases in the block around your property at above market rates. Said it's for a development project." He looked at her. "We thought you should know." She felt it click into place. Not just the Copper Bell, the whole block. Vance was assembling a corridor. Enough land to give a railroad a legitimate right-of-way without needing to fight every property claim individually. He'd buy the willing ones. He'd forge the unwilling ones. She was the unwilling one who wouldn't break. "How many business owners has he approached?" she said. "That we know of 6, Dumas said, "including me." "Did you sign?" "Not yet," he said. "We wanted to." He stopped, tried again. "We wanted to see how things stood with you first." She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about 40 men and a silent saloon and a hand around her throat and the piano that had started playing again before anyone checked whether she was still breathing. "Things stand exactly as they always have, Mr. Dumas," she said. "I own this property legally. Harold Vance is using forged documents and physical intimidation to attempt to take it from me. I am building a legal case that I intend to present to the circuit court. If you have evidence of his dealings, letters, conversations, offers he's made to you in writing, I would ask you to preserve them, not for my sake, for your own." She looked at the 3 of them. "Because when this unravels, and it will unravel, anyone who facilitated him will find themselves in a complicated position." Dumas was quiet. The other 2 looked at the floor. "We didn't come to facilitate him," Reeves said quietly. "Then don't," she said. They left. Cole waited until the door closed. Then he turned on the bar stool and looked at her. 6 businesses, he said. "At minimum," she said. "He's building a land corridor. He needs continuous property for a railway right-of-way. He can't file the route with the Federal Land Office without it." She was already moving back to the office. "Which means we have leverage we didn't have this morning." "How?" he said. "Because if the railroad's involved at the level Vance is suggesting, they've filed a provisional route map with the federal office," she said. "That's public record, and federal records don't answer to Gerald Potts." Cole stood. "Federal Land Office is in Colton Creek," he said. 3 hours by horse." "I know," she said. "Can you be there and back by nightfall?" He looked at her. "You're asking me to ride to Colton Creek." "I'm asking if you're willing to," she said. "You don't work for me, Mr. Maddox. I'm not giving orders." "Cole," he said. She stopped. "What?" "You called me Mr. Maddox again," he said. "We've been in a fight together for 12 hours. You can call me Cole." She held his gaze for a moment. Something moved in her face, not soft exactly, but less guarded. "Cole," she said, "can you be there and back by nightfall?" "If I leave in the next 20 minutes, he said. "Then go," she said. "Look for any provisional route filing under Vance's name or a corporate entity called Meridian Land Partners. That's the shell company he used in Mesa Verde." He was already heading for the door. He stopped, half-turned. "You're going to be here alone while Knox is watching the street." "I'll have Dot," she said. "Dot," he repeated. "Dot has better judgment than most men I've employed, and significantly faster reflexes than she appears to have," Nora said. "I'll be fine." He did not look entirely convinced, but he went. The saloon filled up for the noon hour. She worked the bar herself, which she did on days when she needed to hear what the town was saying. What the town was saying in fragments and lowered voices was what she'd expected Vance was known to be. Pushing. Most people were uncertain which way this would fall, and Cole Maddox's appearance had introduced a variable that nobody seemed sure how to calculate. "You know who he is?" she heard from one table. "Rode with the Delaney outfit down in New Mexico 2-3 years back. Left under circumstances nobody's been real clear on." "Heard he turned on them?" said another voice. "Turned informant." "Heard the opposite. Heard he's on the run from something he did down south." "Heard he's a Pinkerton man." She carried glasses and said nothing. She had learned early that the stories people constructed about others said more about the tellers than the subjects. What she knew about Cole Maddox was narrower and more useful than rumor he had identified Knox by sight. From across a dark street, he had read a fraudulent document and understood its architecture within 60 seconds, and he had ridden toward Colton Creek without asking what was in it for him. That was enough for now. The rest could wait. Dot came back at 1:30. She came in the back through the kitchen, and she came in fast, which Dot never did. Nora was at the bar and saw her and excused herself from the conversation she was having with a cattle rancher who wanted to complain about his drink tab. In the back office, Dot closed the door. "The telegraph office had messages," she said. 3 of them in the past 2 weeks from a company called Meridian Land Partners to an address in Redstone Flats. Nora went still. The girl remembered the content. She remembered the dates and the sender, Dot said, and she remembered the recipient. She paused. The messages were addressed to Gerald Potts, the county clerk, the man who had told them the deed file was misplaced. Nora sat down very slowly. "He's not just sympathetic," she said. "He's on the payroll." "That's how it looks," Dot said, which meant the county records were not just inaccessible. They may have already been altered. The deed that proved Thomas and Nora Carter's legitimate ownership of the Copper Bell Saloon may have had supplementary documents filed against it, false documents, fraudulent claims through the very office responsible for maintaining the public record's integrity. "Dot," she said. "I know," Dot said. "This is bigger than a debt note," she said. "I know that too," Dot said. "If Potts has been filing on Vance's behalf, and if those filings have gone into the county record unopposed, then any judge reviewing the case is going to be looking at a record that says Vance's claims are already legally established." She pressed her hands flat on the desk. "I need originals. I need something that predates any filing Potts could have manipulated." "Like what?" Dot said. "Like the original deed as recorded at the state level," she said. "County records are Potts's territory, but the state land office in Santa Fe receives copies of every original deed at the time of filing. If Vance hasn't reached Santa Fe, and I don't think he has not yet, it's too expensive and too visible, then the original is there and it's clean." "Santa Fe is 4 days by stage," Dot said. "I don't need to go to Santa Fe," Nora said. "I need someone who has already been there." She was thinking. Thomas filed the original deed himself in person. He rode to Santa Fe because he said he didn't trust county clerks, and he wanted the state record in hand. She stood and went to the locked chest in the corner of the office. She had the key on her watch chain. She opened it and began going through the papers inside, some personal, some financial, some things she had not looked at since Thomas died. She found it in the 3rd envelope, a receipt, dated March 14, 1863, issued by the New Mexico Territory State Land Office, Santa Fe. confirming receipt of deed filing for the property located in Redstone Flats Territorial County, under joint ownership of Thomas H. Carter and Eleanor Nora Carter wife. Filed, certified, and recorded at the state level, 3 years before the promissory note that Vance claimed predated their ownership. Filed at the one level of government his county clerk could not reach. She set it on the desk. She looked at it for a long moment. "That's enough," Dot said quietly, reading it over Nora's shoulder. "It's the foundation," Nora said. "It proves the ownership record predates anything Potts could have filed or altered." She was already reaching for a fresh sheet of paper. "I need 2 certified copies of this receipt before tonight. The notary on Callaway Street, does she still work evenings?" "I'll find out," Dot said. "Take Abel with you when you go. Don't take the original, take the best copy you can make and have it notarized as a true copy. Keep the original here." She locked the chest and put the key back on her watch chain. "And Dot?" "Don't tell anyone what it is," Dot said. "I know." She was already at the door. "I wasn't finished," Nora said. "Thank you." Dot paused. She turned and looked at Nora with the steady and undemonstrative affection of a woman who showed care through action rather than sentiment. "You don't need to thank me," she said. "I've worked for you for 7 years. I'd like to keep working for you for 7 more. She opened the door. "I'll be back before dark." She left. Nora sat alone in the quiet of the back office. The noise of the saloon filtered through the closed door boots on floorboards, the clink of glasses, the low, constant murmur of men who were watching to see how this turned out. She picked up the state filing receipt and held it at arm's length and looked at it the way she looked at all documents, not for reassurance, but for completeness. Looking for what it could not do, as clearly as what it could. It established ownership. It predated the fraud. But it could not by itself prove that Vance had conspired with Potts. It could not prove the mineral rights transfer. It could not prove Knox's violence was directed by Vance, rather than being a freelance act. For that, she still needed the county records, and she still needed whatever Cole found in Colton Creek, and she still needed a judge who couldn't be reached by Vance before she could present the case. 6 weeks. She put the receipt back in the chest. She locked it. She went back out to the bar. Knox's men were still across the street at 4 in the afternoon. She could see 2 of them from the window, not trying to be subtle anymore. They wanted her to know they were there. Vance's pressure was moving from implicit to explicit, from the threat of what could happen to the visible promise of it. She went back to work. At 20 minutes past 5, the door opened and Cole Maddox walked in. He was carrying trail dust and something else, a sharpness in his face, a compression around the eyes that told her before he spoke that what he'd found in Colton Creek was significant. She met him at the bar. Dot appeared from the kitchen, and Abel came in from the side door a moment later, and the 4 of them gathered at the far end of the bar with their voices low. Cole put a folded document on the bar. Meridian Land Partners filed a provisional rail corridor route with the Federal Land Office in Colton Creek 11 days ago, he said. The route runs directly through the block containing the Copper Bell and 5 adjacent properties. The filing is under Meridian's corporate seal, signed by Harold Vance as registered agent. He paused. The filing certifies that all land parcels within the corridor are either owned outright by Meridian Land Partners or subject to outstanding debt instruments transferring provisional ownership rights to Meridian pending settlement. The table went quiet. He filed this 11 days ago, Nora said. 11 days, Cole confirmed. Before Knox came here with the contract, she said. By 9 days, Cole said. She understood it fully now. The contract Knox had brought to her was not the beginning of the attempt. It was the public face of something already filed, already moving, already legally in progress through a federal office. Vance had filed the corridor, claiming ownership of her property, and then sent Knox to obtain her signature as after-the-fact validation. If she had signed, she would have confirmed a fraud already in motion. Her refusal hadn't stopped his plan. It had only removed his final, clean legal cover. "He's already told the federal office he owns my land," she said. "He has," Cole said. "So the question is no longer whether he's committed fraud," she said. "The question is whether we can prove it thoroughly enough that the federal filing gets invalidated before the railroad acts on it." "That's the question," Cole said. She looked at the document, then at Cole, then at Dot and Abel, 3 people who had spent the day building the case while Knox's men watched the street outside. "All right," she said. "Here's what we have." She began listing it quiet and precise. The state filing receipt, the notarized copies Dot had obtained, the business invoices establishing continuous operation under her name, Cole's copy of the federal corridor filing, the telegraph records Dot's contact had identified, the typographic and date inconsistencies in the fraudulent promissory note. When she finished, the bar was silent. Abel said, "Is it enough?" She thought about it honestly. "It's enough to establish reasonable doubt about Vance's claim," she said. "It may not be enough to prove the full conspiracy. For that, I'd need the original county records, and Potts has those locked up." She picked up Cole's document and folded it carefully. "But there's one thing we have that Vance hasn't anticipated." "What's that?" Dot said. "He thinks I'm fighting to survive," Nora said. "He built his entire strategy around a woman under pressure making desperate moves." She set the folded document down. "I'm not surviving. I'm building a case. And there's a difference." Cole had been watching her through all of this. When she stopped, he said, "The federal filing has an objection window." She looked at him. "How long?" "30 days from the date of filing," he said, "which means 21 days from today." He paused. "You don't need the circuit judge. You need a federal objection filed in Colton Creek within 21 days, backed by sufficient documentation to trigger a federal review of Vance's corridor claim." The silence that followed was the specific silence of something shifting. "A federal review supersedes county records," she said slowly. "It pulls everything into federal jurisdiction," Cole said. "Potts's manipulation of the county files becomes evidence of obstruction of federal process. It changes the entire landscape." "You know a great deal about federal land law for an outlaw," she said. He met her eyes. "I know a great deal about Harold Vance," he said. "I've been watching him work for 2 years." The sentence landed with weight neither of them had time to examine right now. But Nora stored it the way she stored everything precisely for later. 21 days, she said. 21 days, he said. Outside, the last of Knox's visible watchers finally peeled off the street as the sun went down. The town settled into its evening rhythm. The copper bell opened properly for the night crowd, and Nora worked the bar with Dot and Abel moving around her, and Cole sat at the end of the counter where he could see the door and the ordinary machinery of the saloon turned over and over in the lamplight. But in the back office on the desk, the documents were arranged in order. Evidence sequenced. A timeline constructed. A case not yet complete but moving, building, gathering mass. The way a river gathers mass quietly and inevitably until it is no longer possible to stop. Vance did not know this yet. He still believed she was a woman under pressure running out of time. He did not know about the state filing receipt. He did not know about Dot's contact at the telegraph office. He did not know that Cole Maddox had spent 2 years watching him and had chosen this town and this woman to stop watching and start acting. He did not know what she had become in the 11 years since Thomas had put the books in her hands and said, "You're better at this than me, Nora," and she had believed him and proved it every single day since. The lamp burned in the back office. The documents waited. And Harold Vance, 3 blocks away, poured himself a drink and looked at the map and told himself the widow would break before the week was out. He had never been more wrong about anything in his life. The first threat came at dawn. Not Knox this time. A note slipped under the back door of the Copper Bell sometime in the hours before the town woke up. Abel found it when he came in early to continue sorting the invoice records. He brought it to Nora without opening it, which told her he had learned something about evidence in the past 48 hours. She opened it at her desk. It was brief. 4 sentences, no signature. "You have until Friday to sign." After Friday, the document becomes the least of your problems. The man watching your door cannot watch every door. Think carefully about what you still have left to lose. She read it twice. Then she folded it and put it in the locked chest with the state filing receipt. Friday, Abel said. That's 3 days. I know, she said. What happens Friday? Whatever Vance has decided happens Friday, she said. Which means we have 72 hours to make his timeline irrelevant. She was already pulling on her coat. Go get Cole. Cole read the note standing up, which was how he read everything on his feet, weight balanced like a man who expected to need to move at any moment. He read it once and handed it back. He's escalating because the corridor filing deadline is moving, he said. 21 days sounds like time. It isn't. He knows if a federal objection lands in Colton Creek before he can shore up his documentation, the whole filing goes under review and he loses the railroad contract. So Friday isn't arbitrary, Nora said. Friday is when he plans to take the next step, Cole said. Whether that's another visit from Knox or something worse, I don't know. But 3 days is not enough for him to feel safe. He's pushing because he's afraid. That was a word she hadn't applied to Harold Vance before. She turned it over. Afraid of what specifically? That you're smarter than he accounted for, Cole said. He built this plan for a grieving widow who'd panic and settle. He didn't build it for a woman who spends the night reading statutes and sends a man to Colton Creek for federal records. He looked at her steadily. He's recalculating. That's what Friday is. She put the note in her pocket. Then we recalculate faster, she said. I need to talk to Hector Dumas. Cole looked at her. The feed store owner. He hasn't signed Vance's offer yet, she said. And he came in here yesterday, which means part of him is looking for a reason not to. She picked up her hat. A federal objection filed in Colton Creek is stronger with multiple property owners as co-complainants. If I can get even 2 of the 6 business owners Vance approached to join a co-filing, it changes the evidentiary weight significantly. They said no once, Cole said. When Knox was standing across the street. They said nothing once, she said. Which is different. Let's go. Dumas was at his feed store before 7. He was a square-built man, 50 or so, with the permanent squint of someone who had spent decades measuring things, grain weights, board lengths, the trustworthiness of strangers. He looked at Nora when she came in, and then he looked at Cole and his squint deepened. Mrs. Carter, he said. Mr. Dumas, she said. I'll be direct. I know Harold Vance made you an offer. I know you haven't signed. I'm here to tell you why not signing is the right decision and why joining a federal objection filing is the safer one. He put down the crate he'd been moving. A federal objection, he said. You're taking this to federal court. To the federal land office, she said. Vance filed a provisional rail corridor claim 11 days ago in Colton Creek. That filing includes your property as one he claims ownership or debt control over, which means Vance has already told a federal office that he has rights over your land without your knowledge and without your consent. She let that settle. You're already in this, Mr. Dumas. The only question is whether you're in it on his side or mine. Dumas was quiet for a long moment. The feed store smelled of grain and sawdust and the particular honest smell of a man's life's work. He looked at the floor. He looked at his hands. He'll send Knox, he said. He may, she said. But Knox is one man, and a federal review is a federal review. Vance can intimidate a county clerk. He cannot intimidate a federal land office once a properly documented objection has been received. She paused. I need your business records, proof of your property ownership, your operating history, your name on the deed. Nothing more than that. I do the rest. He looked at Cole for the first time directly. And what's his part in this? He's helping me build the case, she said. Why, Dumas said. Not to Nora, to Cole. Cole held the man's gaze. Because I've seen Vance do this in 2 other towns, he said. And in both of them, nobody put the documentation together fast enough. The railroad got its corridor. The property owners got bought out for less than half value or lost their claims outright. He paused. This is the first time I've seen anyone get ahead of it. Dumas looked at Nora. "You got ahead of it," he said. "It wasn't quite a question." "I'm trying to," she said. "I need help from people who have something to lose." He picked up the crate again. He set it down again. "Give me until noon," he said. "I need to know by 10, she said. "I'm sorry. The timeline is not flexible." He exhaled, long and slow the way a man exhales when he's made a decision he's not entirely at peace with, but can live in. "Come back at 9:30, he said. "I'll have the papers ready." She was back at 9:15. By 10 o'clock she had Dumas' property documentation and a handwritten statement from him attesting to Vance's unsolicited offer, an offer that in writing constituted evidence of Vance's knowledge that the properties were not his to claim in a federal filing. By 11, a woman named Ruth Carey, who ran the seamstress shop on the east end of the block, had heard through Dot that Dumas was joining, and she came to the Copper Bell herself with her own deed papers and a look on her face like she had been waiting for someone to open this particular door. "He approached me twice," Ruth said. "Second time one of his men stood outside my shop for a full day. I lost 3 customers." She set her papers on the bar. "Tell me where to sign." 3 complainants, 3 property owners, 3 sets of documentation establishing independent ownership of land that Harold Vance had claimed in a federal filing to have rights over. Abel was copying and organizing. Dot was cross-referencing dates. Nora was drafting the formal objection letter, precise technical source to the specific federal statute governing provisional land corridor claims, citing the case precedent. She'd found referenced in a legal digest Thomas had kept on the back shelf, and she had read in its entirety in the small hours of the previous night. Cole sat across from her while she wrote, reading through Dumas' documentation. He was quiet in the way that was useful, present, without intruding, processing without performing. At one point he said, "You've done this before." She kept writing. "Done what?" "Built a legal argument," he said. "You write like someone who knows exactly what a judge is going to look for. Thomas wanted to hire a lawyer when we bought this property," she said. "I told him we didn't need one if I read the same books." She turned a page. "He thought I was being stubborn. He was right, and so was I." "Both at once," Cole said. "Usually how it works," she said. He was quiet again for a moment. Then, "When did he die?" She did not stop writing. 3 years and 4 months ago, she said. "Fever. He was sick for 11 days, and then he was gone." She turned another page. "I had the saloon to run, and 3 employees and a supply contract to renegotiate, and 2 weeks to grieve before the bills came due. So I grieved for 2 weeks, and then I went back to the books." "That's—" He stopped. "Practical," she said. "Yes." She looked up. "Is that a problem?" "No," he said. And then more quietly, "I was going to say that's the hardest thing a person can do." She held his gaze for a moment. Just a moment. Then she went back to writing. At 2:30 in the afternoon, the window in the back office broke. Not from the street side, from the alley. A single sharp impact, glass falling inward, and before Nora had fully registered the sound, she was already moving years of saloon management instinct, overriding surprise. She was out of the office chair and through the door into the main room in less than 3 seconds. Cole was already standing, revolver drawn, angled toward the back. "Stay here," he said. "It's my building," she said. He looked at her. She looked back. He moved toward the back, and she moved with him, which was not what he'd asked for and was exactly what he'd expected. The back room was used for storage crates, barrels, the overflow of a working saloon. The window that looked onto the alley was broken glass on the floor, curtain moving. Nobody was in the room. But the filing cabinet in the corner, the one where she kept the secondary copies of the business invoices, was open. Papers had been pulled out and scattered. Some were gone. She scanned the room in the quick and practiced way of someone who knew every inch of it. She crossed to the filing cabinet and went through what remained. Her hands were steady. Her mind was doing mathematics. "The invoice copies," she said. "The ones from Hendricks and the supply contracts from 2869 through 1871. They're gone." Cole was at the broken window looking at the alley without leaning out. 2, maybe 3 minutes ago, he said. Ground's soft. I can see tracks, but they're heading north already out of sight. She stood at the filing cabinet and did not allow herself the luxury of panic. She thought about what was gone and what remained. The invoice copies had been secondary documentation important for establishing business continuity, but not the foundation of the case. The foundation was in the locked chest, the state filing receipt, Cole's copy of the federal corridor filing the notarized copies Dot had obtained. She went and checked the chest. Locked. Undisturbed. She breathed. They didn't get what they came for, she said. They got something, Cole said. Even secondary documentation in Vance's hands could let him anticipate what you're filing. It tells him I'm building a business continuity record, she said. Which tells him I'm thinking about the court case, not the settlement. Which tells him... She stopped. He already knows I'm not going to settle. This wasn't reconnaissance. This was a message. Cole turned from the window. He's telling you he can reach inside your building. Yes, she said. They looked at each other across the back room, with the glass on the floor and the curtain moving in the alley breeze. We need to move the filing date, Cole said. If he escalates before Friday, you can't be still building when he hits. The objection letter isn't finished, she said. How long? 3 hours if I don't stop, she said. Then don't stop, he said. I'll handle the building. She went back to the office. She closed the door. She sat down and picked up her pen, and she did not stop. Cole spent those 3 hours moving through the saloon with a quietness that Dot described later as almost frightening. Not the quietness of a man trying to be invisible, but the quietness of a man who had become so accustomed to threat that his body had learned to run its own security without requiring his conscious attention. He checked the back door. He spoke briefly to the 2 saloon hands who came in for the afternoon shift, and told them, without particular emphasis, that anyone who came through the alley entrance tonight was to be stopped before they reached the building. The men looked at him and nodded with the compliance of people who had understood that compliance was the correct response. At 3:45, Abel knocked on the office door. Mrs. Carter, there's someone here. Not Vance, not Knox. A woman mid-40s dressed for travel with the particular set of jaw that Nora had learned to recognize as someone who had come a long way for a specific reason and intended to accomplish it. She introduced herself as Margaret Ellery. She said she was from Mesa Verde. She said Harold Vance had done the same thing to her family's cattle operation 14 months ago. She said they had lost. Nora felt the room rearrange itself around that sentence. She pulled up a chair. Sit down, Mrs. Ellery, she said. Tell me everything. Margaret Ellery had ridden 4 days to get to Redstone Flats. Not because she'd heard about Nora specifically, but because she'd heard the name Meridian Land Partners connected to another property dispute in the territory, and she had been following that name the way a wounded animal follows the scent of the thing that hurt it. She had come to find the next victim and arrived to find the next victim fighting back, which was something she hadn't expected, and which made her sit in her chair with her hands folded and something moving in her face that was not quite hope but was in the same county. Her family's property in Mesa Verde had been claimed under a fraudulent debt instrument nearly identical to the one sent to Nora. The forged promissory note. The county clerk who had been impossible to work with. The visit from a man with threats in place of conversation. They had tried to fight it through the county court, and the county court judge had ruled against them in 60 days. Fast, almost impossibly fast, in a way that Margaret had spent 14 months understanding, meant the judge had been paid. But before we lost the county case, she said, my husband copied every document we had into a separate ledger. Every transaction record, every deed reference, every payment. We lost the property, but we kept the ledger. Where is it? Nora said. In my saddlebag, Margaret said. The silence that followed was the kind that has physical weight. Mrs. Ellery, Nora said carefully, if that ledger establishes that Vance used the same fraudulent methodology in Mesa Verde that he's using here, the same type of forged debt instrument, the same county record manipulation, then it's not just evidence of what he did to your family. It's evidence of a pattern. A deliberate and repeated scheme. That changes the legal category of what he's doing from a property dispute to federal fraud. Margaret looked at her. Can you beat him? I intend to, Nora said. My husband didn't think a woman alone could hold this kind of case together, Margaret said, not unkindly, simply as a fact she was reporting. Your husband may not have met the right woman, Nora said. Something in Margaret's face broke open just briefly and then closed again. She reached into her coat and produced a ledger, worn at the spine, dense with columns of figures and notes, in a hand that was meticulous even under duress. She set it on the desk between them. Nora picked it up. She opened it. She read the first page and the second, and by the third, she understood that she was holding the connective tissue. The case had been missing direct evidentiary linkage between Vance's Mesa Verde operation and his Redstone Flats operation, showing not just similarity, but structural identity. The same template, the same shell company, the same sequence, forged note county clerk pressure, physical intimidation, federal filing. She had the pattern, in writing, in someone else's hand documenting it before they lost. She looked up at Margaret Ellery. Can I use this? Why do you think I rode 4 days? Margaret said. When Cole came back into the office 20 minutes later, Nora set the ledger on the desk without a word and watched him read the first 3 pages. He went very still. Where did this come from? He said. Mesa Verde, Nora said. Same scheme, different town, 14 months ago. He turned pages. His jaw tightened. This establishes the pattern, he said. It does more than that, Nora said. Page 11. Look at the corporate filing dates. He turned to page 11. He read. He looked up. He filed the Meridian Land Partners Incorporation 11 days before the Mesa Verde scheme started, he said. And 17 days before the Redstone Flats filing, she said. The corporation was created as a vehicle, designed from the beginning for repeated use. She leaned forward. Cole, this isn't a land grab. This is an organized criminal enterprise with federal rail contracts as the financial motive. That's a different law entirely. He set the ledger down slowly. If you file this with the objection, it converts the objection from a property dispute into a fraud complaint triggering federal criminal investigation, she said. Which means it doesn't go to the land office administrator. It goes to the federal marshal's office. The word marshal sat in the room between them. Cole picked up his coffee. He did not drink it. He set it down. He looked at the ledger and then at Nora, and then at something past both of them that she couldn't read. Cole, she said. I know, he said. That's the right move, she said. You know that. I know, he said again. Quieter this time. Something in his voice had changed. Registers not reluctance exactly, but weight. The weight of a man for whom the word marshal was not a neutral word. She looked at him, and she did not look away. Is there something you need to tell me before I file this? She said. He was quiet for a long moment. The kind of quiet that isn't evasion, but is someone deciding how much truth fits in a room. I told you I've been watching Vance for 2 years, he said. You did. I didn't tell you why, he said. 2 years ago, I was working a cattle operation south of here. Vance ran the same scheme on the owner, a man named Del Harmon. Del didn't have the records Harmon kept. He didn't have anyone to help him build a case. He stopped. He lost everything. His property, his herd, his livelihood. He died the following winter. Not from Vance directly, from the consequences of having nothing. He looked at her. Del Harmon was my uncle. She held that. She held it the way you hold something fragile carefully, without squeezing. So this is personal, she said. It's been personal since the beginning, he said. But I didn't come to Redstone Flats for revenge. I came because I heard Meridian Land Partners was active again, and I thought if I was here when it started I could... He stopped. I thought I could do something more useful than watch. You have, she said. The federal corridor filing. You found that. You'd have found it, he said. Maybe, she said. Not as fast. She looked at him steadily. The federal marshal filing is still the right move. I know, he said. Even if it brings federal attention to Redstone Flats, she said. Even if whoever or whatever you're concerned about. I'm not running from the law, he said. I want that to be clear. I believe you, she said. He looked at her. You do. I read people the way I read documents, she said. You don't read like a man hiding from the law. You read like a man who's been disappointed by it. She picked up her pen. Those are different things. He was quiet. Then he said, Write the complaint. She wrote it. The objection letter with the federal fraud complaint attached ran to 11 pages. It cited the corridor filing date, the Meridian Land Partners corporate structure, the forged promissory note with its typographic and date inconsistencies, the state filing receipt establishing prior legitimate ownership, the Mesa Verde ledger as pattern evidence, Dumas and Carey's statements as co-complainants, and the telegraph messages linking Gerald Potts to Meridian Land Partners as evidence of county record obstruction. 11 pages. Every claim sourced. Every citation numbered. Abel made 3 copies in a hand so precise it looked printed. Dot checked each one against the original. Margaret Ellery witnessed and signed as an additional complainant with personal knowledge of prior related fraud. It was past 9 at night when the last copy was finished. Nora set the pen down. She flexed her hand. She looked at the stack of documents on the desk and felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel since Knox's hand had closed around her throat. Something that was not quite relief, not quite pride, but was related to both. The feeling of a thing built correctly from the ground up, with no shortcuts and no assumptions. Someone needs to ride to Colton Creek tonight, she said. I'll go, Cole said. It's a 3-hour ride in the dark, she said. I've ridden worse, he said. She looked at him across the desk. The lamp was low. The saloon had gone quiet outside. It was the specific quiet of a place that had settled for the night while its owner stayed awake doing the work that kept it standing. Cole, she said. He stopped. When this is over, she said. Whatever happens with the marshal, whatever comes out, I want you to know that what you've done here matters. She did not say it softly. She said it the way she said everything directly without decoration. Not just for me, for Del Harmon too. He was still for a moment. Then he picked up the documents and put them carefully inside his coat. I'll be back by morning, he said. He left. Nora sat alone at her desk. She listened to his boots on the floor, and then on the boardwalk outside, and then the silence that followed. She picked up the last remaining copy of the federal complaint and read it through one more time, the way she always read her final work, looking not for satisfaction, but for gaps. She found none. She locked the copies in the chest. She banked the lamp. She stood and stretched the stiffness out of her back and her neck, the neck that still carried a fading bruise on its left side, the bruise she had refused to cover or explain or apologize for in front of the town that had watched it happen. She thought about Friday, 3 days away. Vance's deadline, the deadline that would mean nothing once a federal fraud complaint hit the Colton Creek office. She thought about Del Harmon, who had died without records and without help. She thought about Thomas, who had ridden to Santa Fe himself to file a deed because he didn't trust county clerks, and had been right to not trust them, and had left her the evidence of that correctness on a receipt in a locked chest that was now the cornerstone of a federal fraud case. She thought about the 11 years she had spent learning every line of every document that touched this building, not because she had expected to need it, but because she was the kind of woman who needed to know. She turned off the lamp. In the dark, she stood for a moment in the office she had shared with Thomas, and then kept alone in the building that Vance had decided was already his, and she understood something she had been too busy to articulate until now. He had sent Knox to frighten her into submission because he believed that a woman alone was a woman without resources. He had not understood that the resources were the point, that she had built them, carefully, over 11 years. Not because she had seen this coming, but because she had understood in the way that women who survive understand things that the world required you to be prepared for the thing you could not predict. She was prepared. She went upstairs. She did not sleep immediately. She lay in the dark, and she listened to Redstone Flats breathe its nighttime breath, and somewhere in the 3 hours before dawn, she finally closed her eyes. 3 blocks away, Harold Vance looked at the map on his desk and told himself the widow's resistance was a temporary condition. His man at the county clerk's office had sent word that the backroom filing cabinet had been accessed successfully, secondary documents retrieved. He didn't know yet what was missing. He didn't know about the locked chest. He didn't know about Margaret Ellery. He didn't know about the 11-page complaint riding toward Colton Creek in the inside coat pocket of a man who had been waiting 2 years for exactly this moment. He poured his drink. He looked at the map. He decided Friday would resolve everything. It was the last comfortable certainty Harold Vance would have for a very long time. Cole came back at 6:43 in the morning. Nora heard the horse before she heard the door. She had been awake since 5, sitting at the desk with coffee. She hadn't finished going through the remaining documents one more time, the way a surgeon checks instruments before an operation. Not because she doubted the work, because she was the kind of person who checked. He came in through the front, which meant the street was clear enough that he hadn't needed to use the alley. She read that as a good sign before she read his face, and his face confirmed it. Not relief. Cole Maddox did not appear to operate in relief, but something settled. The particular settledness of a man who has completed a thing correctly. He sat down at the bar. She poured coffee without being asked. "It's filed," he said. She set the pot down. "The full complaint. Every page," he said. "The Federal Land Office duty clerk logged it at 2:40 in the morning. I waited while he read the first 3 pages. He called his supervisor." Cole picked up the cup. The supervisor read the Mesa Verde ledger section and used the word unprecedented, which I took as a positive indicator. "Did they say what happens next?" The supervisor said a federal review notice would be issued to Meridian Land Partners within 72 hours. Cole said. "That notice legally suspends all actions taken under the provisional corridor filing pending investigation. It also triggers mandatory notification to the Territorial Marshal's office." Nora was quiet for a moment. "So within 3 days, Vance receives official notice that his corridor filing is under federal review, and that the Marshal's office has been informed," Cole said. "That's before Friday," she said. "By 1 day," he said. She turned that over. Vance's deadline was Friday. The federal review notice would arrive Thursday at the earliest, which meant there was a window Wednesday, possibly into Thursday morning, where Vance still believed his timeline was intact and didn't yet know the ground had shifted under him. A window where he might move. "He's going to do something before the notice arrives," she said. "I think so too," Cole said. When a man sets a Friday deadline and his plan has been moving for 11 days without significant obstruction, he doesn't sit quietly Wednesday night waiting for the clock to run out. He does something to guarantee the outcome. "Knocks," she said. "Or worse than knocks," Cole said. Knocks was the opening move. What comes after the opening move when it didn't work is usually something with less pretense of legality. She thought about the broken window, the missing invoices, the note under the back door. "We have 2 days to make the Copper Bell an unattractive target," she said. "Legally, physically, publicly." "Publicly?" Cole said. "That's the part I want to understand." She stood and came around the bar. She went to the door and opened it. The town was barely awake, early light, a couple of figures moving at the far end of the street, and she stood looking at it for a moment. Then she came back in. "Vance's power in this town is based on the belief that he will win," she said. "Not that he's right. Not that his claim is legitimate. People are afraid of him because they believe he gets what he wants and punishes those who stand in his way. That belief is the engine." She sat across from Cole. "If that belief breaks even partially before he can act on Friday, his ability to use the town's silence as a weapon weakens." "You want the town to know about the federal filing," Cole said. "I want the town to know something is happening that is larger than Harold Vance," she said. "I'm not asking them to fight. I'm asking them to stop being as afraid. There's a difference." He considered this. Dumas, he said. And Ruth Carey, she said. And anyone else who signed the co-complaint. When people in town see that 3 property owners joined a federal fraud filing against Vance, it changes the arithmetic. 1 woman alone is easy to dismiss. 1 woman and 2 neighbors, and a witness from Mesa Verde is something else entirely. Word will get back to Vance, Cole said. Good, she said. I want it to. He looked at her with that look again, not quite a smile, but the acknowledgement that a smile was available if the world continued to contain this conversation. You want him to know he's already lost before he does something that can't be undone. I want him to calculate correctly, she said. For once. She stood. Go sleep, she said. You rode all night. I need you functional this afternoon, not running on 2 hours and stubbornness. He looked like he was going to argue. He looked at her face and reconsidered. 3 hours, he said. There's a room upstairs, she said. Dot uses it when she works late. It's clean. She said it matter-of-factly without weight, the way she handled most things. He stood. He picked up his hat. He paused at the foot of the stairs and turned. Nora. She looked up from the papers she'd already returned to. What you built in that complaint, he said. 11 pages of source-documented, legally structured argument. Alone. In 3 days. He stopped. Dell would have given anything to have someone like you in his corner. She held that quietly. She did not deflect it or diminish it. Go sleep, Cole, she said. He went upstairs. She went back to work. By mid-morning, the word was moving through Redstone Flats, the way words move through small frontier towns, not in announcement, but in accumulation. Hector Dumas mentioned the federal filing to 2 men at the grain exchange. Ruth Carey told her Wednesday customers. Abel, who had not been instructed to be quiet about it, mentioned it to 3 people in the course of the morning, because Abel had the natural informational generosity of a young man who believed that transparency was a virtue. By noon, Gerald Potts knew. Nora knew he knew because his assistant, a young woman named Clara, who had worked the clerk's office counter for 2 years, and whom Nora had always treated with basic courtesy, in a building where courtesy was not always extended, came to the back door of the Copper Bell at 12:20. She knocked 3 times quickly, the way someone knocks when they're not sure they should be there. Dot brought her to the office. Clara stood with her hands folded and her expression composed in the careful way of someone who has rehearsed composure against the possibility of losing it. She was maybe 22. She looked at Nora and said, I heard what you filed in Colton Creek. Sit down, Nora said. I can't stay? Clara said. Mr. Potts is at lunch. I have maybe 15 minutes. She swallowed. There are files in the back of the county office, files that were brought in 8 days ago for storage. Mr. Potts told me they were routine archive transfers from the territorial office, but they weren't. I've done archive transfers, and they don't come in sealed envelopes with no transfer manifest. Nora went very still. How many files? 5 envelopes, Clara said. Thick ones. I saw the top of one when Mr. Potts was handling it. I saw the words Copper Bell on the corner of a document inside. Did you see anything else? A county seal, Clara said. But it was on the wrong color paper. County documents come on white. This was cream. She paused. And the seal had a shadow around it. A double impression. Nora looked at her steadily. The double impression. The same defect she had noted on the forged promissory note. Clara, she said carefully, what you're describing is evidence of document fraud in a county government office. If you're willing to state what you've told me in a formal declaration, it becomes part of the federal investigation, which means you are protected under federal complaint procedures from any retaliation by county officials. Clara's composure cracked slightly, not into tears, but into the visible effort of maintaining herself against the pressure of what she was considering. Will it actually work? She said. Will this actually stop him? I filed an 11-page federal fraud complaint at 2:40 this morning, Nora said. It includes pattern evidence from a prior scheme in Mesa Verde, 3 co-complainants from this town county telegraph records, and a state land office filing that predates every document Vance has produced. She looked at Clara without blinking. It's going to work, but your testimony about those files makes it faster and cleaner. Clara was quiet for 10 seconds. I need to be back before Mr. Potts returns from lunch, she said. Abel, Nora said without raising her voice. Abel appeared in the doorway as if he'd been standing by, which he had been. I can take a handwritten declaration in 5 minutes, he said. I've done 3 already this week. Clara sat down. Abel produced paper and pen. She spoke, and he wrote in his precise and rapid hand, and 7 minutes later, she signed it with the particular decisiveness of a young woman who has decided to stop being afraid of the things she has been afraid of, and finds the decision cleaner than she expected. She left the way she came. Back door, quick steps gone. Nora read the declaration. She added it to the locked chest. She stood with her hand on the lid for a moment. 5 sealed envelopes in the county clerk's back office. Documents with copper bell written on them. Forged supplements to the county record staged to establish a false paper trail that would make Vance's fraudulent claims look like legitimate filed documents. He had not just forged a debt note. He had built a parallel record system inside the county office itself, a false history designed to exist alongside and eventually replace the legitimate one, which meant destroying the evidence was not enough for him anymore. He needed those files to survive any review. He needed Potts to protect them, and Potts was now in a position where the federal review notice was coming in 48 hours. She knew with the cold clarity that came from understanding how men like Vance calculated what he was going to do next. He was going to try to move those files. She called Cole down from upstairs at 2 in the afternoon. He came down looking somewhat less road-worn, which she took as evidence that 3 hours of sleep were not nothing. She told him about Clara and the 5 envelopes. He listened without interrupting, which she had come to understand was how he listened to everything important. He's going to move them before the review notice arrives, Cole said. Tonight or tomorrow night, she said. He can't move them in daylight without being seen, and he'll want them gone before Thursday. Where does he move them? Burn them or relocate them somewhere outside county jurisdiction, she said. Either way, once they're gone, we lose the ability to prove the parallel record system existed. We keep our own evidence the complaint holds, but the full scope of the conspiracy becomes harder to establish. So we need those files before he moves them, Cole said. We need someone who can legally compel their preservation, she said, which we don't have until the federal review notice triggers marshal involvement. She paused. Unless. He looked at her. The territorial judge, she said. Not the circuit judge. The territorial judge in Santa Fe has the authority to issue an emergency evidence preservation order in cases where federal fraud has been alleged and there is demonstrated risk of evidence destruction. She had found this in Thomas's Legal Digest at 4 in the morning 2 nights ago and had filed it in her mind as a contingency. If I can get a telegram to the territorial courthouse with a summary of the complaint and a request for an emergency order, a judge could issue it within 24 hours. You'd need to get the telegram sent before Vance can intercept it, Cole said. Dot's contact at the telegraph office, she said. Can she be trusted for something this significant? She sent us the Meridian Land Partners messages, Nora said. She's already in this. She stood. I'll go myself. Dot comes with me. You stay here. He was already shaking his head. Knox is still in town. His men are still watching. Which is why you need to be visible here, she said. If you come with me and they're watching the building with nobody they recognize inside, they may decide tonight is the night. If you're here, they wait. He understood the logic. He did not like the logic. These were 2 different things. Take Abel, he said. Abel is 19 doors away, collecting Ruth Carey's additional documentation, she said. Then take Dumas. Hector Dumas is a feed store owner, not a. Then take whoever is standing closest to the door when you leave, Cole said, and there was an edge in his voice now that was not quite a request. Nora, I'm not asking you to take a guard. I'm asking you to not walk to the telegraph office alone while Knox's men are on the street." She looked at him. He looked back with the steady intensity of someone who has decided that some arguments are worth having, even when the other person is probably right about the strategy. "Fine," she said. She took Dot and a saloon hand named Warren, who was 6'2" and had forearms like fence posts, and who Nora paid an extra $1 to be available for physical eventualities. They walked to the telegraph office at 2:30 on a Wednesday afternoon, like three people going about ordinary business, which was more or less what they were doing if you defined ordinary loosely enough. The telegraph office girl, whose name Nora now knew, was Jessie, read Nora's draft message to the territorial courthouse with the focused expression of someone who understood she was handling something significant and intended to handle it correctly. "This goes priority," Jessie said. "Priority and confidential," Nora said. "Addressed to the clerk of the territorial court, attention, urgent evidence preservation request, federal fraud matter." Jessie sent it. She wrote down the transmission confirmation number and handed it to Nora without being asked, which told Nora that Jessie was the kind of person who understood documentation instinctively. "If anyone asks what I sent," Nora said. "I get a lot of traffic," Jessie said. "Hard to remember every message." Nora put $2 on the counter. Jessie did not look at them until Nora was out the door. They were back at the Copper Bell by 3:15. Cole had not moved from the bar. Knox had not made a move. The afternoon stretched. Nora ran the saloon. She watched the street. She thought about the 5 envelopes in Gerald Potts's back office and the 48 hours between now and the federal review notice and the unknown number of hours before the territorial court responded to her preservation request. At 5 o'clock, Margaret Ellery came down from the room she'd been given upstairs. She sat at the bar. She accepted coffee from Dot. She looked at Nora and said, "What do you need me to do?" "You've already done the most important thing," Nora said. "I've been sitting upstairs for 2 days," Margaret said. "I didn't ride 4 days to sit upstairs." Nora looked at her. There was something in Margaret Ellery's face that she recognized not from another person, but from her own mirror. The look of a woman who has been inside a loss long enough that fighting is the only direction that still makes sense. "Can you write?" Nora said. "My husband said I wrote better than he did," Margaret said. Which was true. "I need a timeline," Nora said. Written narrative of everything that happened in Mesa Verde. Every date, every person, every action Vance or his agents took. In order. Detailed. She slid paper and pen across the bar. "The federal investigator will want it. Better to have it ready." Margaret pulled the paper toward her and picked up the pen. "How detailed," she said. "As detailed as you can make it," Nora said. "Leave nothing out." Margaret began writing. The sound of pen on paper joined the ordinary sounds of the saloon filling up for the evening, and Nora thought not for the first time about what it meant that the women in this room, herself. Dot, Margaret, Ruth Carey, who had come and gone. Clara, who had risked her position, had all moved faster and more decisively than the men who had watched Knox put his hand around her throat and done nothing. She did not say this out loud. She didn't need to. It was simply true the way a column of figures is true when it adds up correctly. At 7:43, 3 things happened in quick succession. The first was that Cole came from the front window and said low and quick, "Knox just crossed the street toward the building." The second was that a shot sounded from the back alley, not inside the building but close. Too close. The third was that Abel Pike burst through the side door with blood on his left hand and a look on his face that Nora had never seen there before. Not panic, but the immediate aftermath of panic, the face of someone who has just cleared panic and landed in a cold and functional place. "They jumped me in the alley," he said. 2 of them. They wanted the satchel. He held up the satchel he was still carrying. They didn't get it. Inside the satchel was Ruth Carey's additional documentation. Her secondary deed records her signed statement, and Nora realized with a cold drop in her chest, the original signed copy of the co-complaint she had entrusted to Abel for safekeeping while she went to the telegraph office. "Are you hurt?" she said. Hands cut from the fall, he said. Nothing broken. She looked at Cole. Cole was already moving toward the front door, reading the street. Knox stopped, he said. He's watching the front. He doesn't know what happened in the alley yet. He turned. This was coordinated. Knox at the front as a distraction, men in the back for the documents. They knew what was in the satchel, Nora said. Someone talked, Dot said from the kitchen doorway. Her voice was flat and specific. Or someone was watched, Nora said. She thought about Abel's route. He had come from Ruth Carey's seamstress shop. Knox's men had been watching the building. If one of them had followed Abel from the shop, it doesn't matter right now, Cole said. Knox is still out front. The men who jumped Abel are still in the alley or close to it. We need to make a decision. Call him in, Nora said. Cole turned. What? Call Knox in, she said. Open the front door and tell him Nora Carter wants to speak with him. She was already behind the bar, standing straight, the Colt on her hip where it always was. Right now, he has 2 men in the alley and uncertain information about whether they succeeded. If I make him come in here and face me in front of witnesses, he loses the option of pretending this is a business negotiation. Cole held her gaze for 3 full seconds. You're turning his move into a public record, he said. Every person in this saloon is a witness, she said. Right now, tonight. Whatever Knox does or says when he walks through that door becomes part of what this town knows. She looked around the room, 20-odd people, locals, regulars, men who had been silent once and might be again, but who were here and paying attention. Vance wants me isolated and quiet. The most dangerous thing I can do is be loud and in public. Cole turned and went to the front door. He opened it. He did not go outside. He stood in the doorway and said in a voice calibrated to carry across the street without shouting, Mr. Knox, Mrs. Carter would like a word. The saloon went silent. Even the piano stopped, and Abel hadn't touched it. Knox came in. He came in the way he'd come in the first night, quiet, reading the room before he finished entering it. But something was different now. The room was full, and looking at him, which was different from the first night when the room had looked away. People were watching him the way people watch something they have decided has to be witnessed. He looked at Nora. She looked at him from behind the bar. Your men attacked my clerk in the alley 20 minutes ago, she said. Her voice was even, loud enough for the room. They failed to take what they were after. The documents they wanted are currently secured in a federal complaint that was filed in Colton Creek last night. That complaint is under active review by the Federal Land Office and has been referred to the Territorial Marshal's Office. Knox's expression did not change. Anything that happens to me, to my employees, to this building, or to any of the co-complainants in that federal filing, she said, becomes evidence in a federal criminal investigation, not a county dispute. Federal. She let that word sit. Harold Vance has 48 hours before he receives a formal federal review notice suspending his corridor filing. That notice is already in transit. I am telling you this so that you can tell him, because the time for pretending this is a negotiation is over. Knox stood in the middle of the saloon floor. He was a large man and a frightening one, and Nora was aware of both those facts and continued speaking anyway. I also want you to understand, she said, that this room contains approximately 20 witnesses to this conversation. Their names can be taken tonight. Their testimony is available to a federal investigator. She looked at him without flinching. You put your hand around my throat in front of witnesses who said nothing. I am giving them a second opportunity. She looked at the room. The room did not look away. Hector Dumas, sitting at a corner table, stood up slowly. He didn't say anything. He just stood. A man named Carver, who ran the barber shop and had been drinking in the Copper Bell since Thomas Carter's time, stood up. Then 2 more, then another. Not everyone, not the whole room, but enough that the quality of the air changed the way it had changed the first night Knox walked in, except in a completely opposite direction. The first night the room had contracted around silence. Tonight it was expanding around something else. Knox looked at the standing men. He looked at Nora. He put his hat on. Mr. Vance will be in contact, he said. Mr. Vance can file a response through the Federal Land Office, she said. That's the appropriate channel at this point. Knox left. The door swung shut. Nobody moved for a full 3 seconds. Then Dumas sat down, and when he sat down, the air broke properly, and conversation started up again in the low and energized way of a room that has just witnessed something it didn't expect to witness and is still processing what it means. Nora stayed behind the bar. She did not perform relief. She poured herself water, not whiskey, and drank it, and set the glass down, and looked at Abel, whose hand Dot was wrapping with a clean cloth, and at Cole, who was standing at the window watching the street with the contained alertness he always carried. He turned from the window. He looked at her. She looked back. That was either very smart, he said, or very dangerous. It was both, she said. Most useful things are. He came to the bar. She poured him coffee. He drank it. He's going to Vance right now, Cole said. Vance is going to know everything you just said within the hour. Good, she said. And when Vance knows the federal notice is coming Thursday, he has 2 choices, she said. Run or fight. If he fights in front of a federal investigation that already has his documented pattern of fraud, a co-complainant from his last scheme, and a county clerk's assistant who saw his forged documents in the back office. She wiped the bar down because it needed wiping, and because her hands wanted something to do. If he runs, the investigation continues without him, and his corridor filing collapses. He might not calculate it that clearly, Cole said. Men like Vance don't always cut losses. Sometimes they double down. I know, she said, which means tonight or tomorrow he does something you haven't prepared for. I've prepared for everything I can prepare for, she said. The rest I handle when it happens. She looked at him steadily. That's how it works, Cole. You can't outthink everything. At some point you've done the work and you stand in it and you see what comes. He was quiet. He looked at his coffee. He looked at her. How are you this calm? He said. I'm not calm, she said. I'm precise. There's a difference. Something in his face shifted. Not the almost smile. Something quieter. Something that had been building in small increments over 3 days of shared work and shared risk, and the particular intimacy of 2 people who have been in a fight together long enough that pretense becomes too inefficient to bother with. Nora, he said. Don't, she said. Not unkindly. He stopped. Not tonight, she said. There's still too much in motion. When this is finished, when the judge has ruled and the investigation is running and the copper bell is still standing, then we can have whatever conversation that is. She picked up the bar cloth. Tonight we finish the work. He nodded. He understood. She had always suspected he would understand. At 9:10, the response from the territorial courthouse arrived by telegraph. Jessie brought it herself, walking the 6 blocks at 9 at night, because she had understood from the nature of the message what kind of case this was. She handed it to Nora at the bar. Nora read it. The territorial judge had granted the emergency evidence preservation order, effective immediately. Directed to the Redstone Flats County Clerk's office. All documents related to properties within the stated corridor filing were to be sealed and held pending federal review. Removal, alteration, or destruction of any such documents constituted obstruction of a federal proceeding. A copy of the order was being transmitted to the county clerk's office by official territorial courier. Expected arrival the following morning. Gerald Potts would receive it before he could move the 5 envelopes. She read the message twice. She folded it. She held it for a moment. Then she looked at Cole, who had been watching her read it, and she said, "It's done." He read it. He set it on the bar. He did not say anything for a moment. Then Dot appeared from the kitchen, and Nora handed her the message, and she read it and set it down on the bar next to the coffee cup and the water glass and the folded bar cloth and all the small ordinary objects of a working night in a working saloon. Well, Dot said. She said it the way Dot said everything, without excess, without performance. Good. Abel looked up from his bandaged hand. Does this mean It means Vance can't destroy the evidence, Nora said. It means the federal review proceeds with the county records intact. It means the case has teeth. She looked around at the three of them. It's not over. But the ground has changed. Outside Redstone Flats was settling into its late night. Down the street in the land office he'd leased for the season, Harold Vance was listening to Knox describe a saloon full of men who had stood up, a woman who had announced the federal filing from behind her own bar, and a clerk's complaint about injuries in an alley that had failed to produce the documents it was meant to take. Vance listened. He was very still. He looked at the map. Then he said, "Get me my lawyer." Knox said, "It's past 9. "I know what time it is," Vance said. "Get him." 3 blocks away, the lamp in the back office of the Copper Bell burned steady and clear, and under its light the documents were arranged in sequence, each one a piece of a truth that had been assembled with patience and precision, and the specific determination of a woman who had learned over 11 years of keeping the books alone that the record was everything. The record, once correct, could not be unwritten. Harold Vance was about to find out how permanent that was. The Territorial Courier arrived at 8:15 Thursday morning. Nora was already in the street when he rode in, not waiting exactly, but present the way she had learned to be present for things that mattered. She watched him dismount in front of the county clerk's office, and she watched Gerald Potts receive the sealed document through the front window, and she watched Potts's face go the specific color of a man reading something that has ended his calculation. She did not go in. She did not need to. She went back to the Copper Bell and poured herself coffee and sat at the bar and let the morning do what it was going to do. Cole came down from upstairs at 8:30. He had slept 4 hours, which was more than the previous 2 nights combined. He looked at her face, and he said, "The courier came." "Potts has the preservation order," she said. He sat down. She poured him coffee. They sat in the quiet of the early saloon, the room not yet opened. The chairs still up on most of the tables, the light coming in clean and flat through the front windows. Vance's lawyer was at the land office until past midnight. Cole said, "I could see the light from the street." "I know," she said. "I saw it too." "He's building a defense," Cole said. "Or a counter-filing, something to buy time. He can file whatever he wants," she said. "The federal objection is logged and stamped. The preservation order is served. The marshal's office has been notified. He can't unfile what I've filed." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "What he can do is complicate the hearing. Delay it. Make the process expensive enough that a smaller opponent would settle." She looked at Cole. "He's going to find out today that I'm not a smaller opponent." At 9 o'clock, a rider came in from the east, not from Colton Creek, but from the territorial capital. He carried a second document, this one addressed directly to Nora Carter, care of the Copper Bell Saloon, Redstone Flats. She opened it at the bar with Cole and Dot and Abel standing close enough to read it over her shoulder. It was from the Federal Land Office. Not the duty clerk who had received the filing at 2:40 in the morning, but the regional commissioner, whose name Nora had seen on official correspondence before, and whose signature carried the weight of federal authority. The letter confirmed that the Meridian Land Partners Provisional Corridor filing was formally suspended pending investigation. It confirmed that the federal fraud complaint had been accepted for full review, and it contained one additional line that Nora read twice and then read aloud. In light of the documented pattern of fraudulent activity across multiple territorial jurisdictions, the United States Marshal's Office Territorial Division has dispatched an investigative deputy to Redstone Flats. Expected arrival Thursday or Friday of the current week. Dot said, "A marshal." "A deputy marshal," Nora said. "But yes." Abel made a sound that was somewhere between relief and disbelief. "It's actually happening," he said. "It's been happening," Nora said. "We built it so it would happen." She folded the letter. Cole. He was already reading ahead of where she was. "Vance doesn't know the marshal is coming," he said. "He knows the marshal's office was notified," she said. "He doesn't know the deputy is already riding. That letter arrived faster than expected." She looked at him. "We have a window." Whatever Vance plans for today, he plans it thinking he has until tomorrow, at the earliest, before federal presence arrives in town. If we use today correctly— The hearing, Cole said. She nodded. Judge Crane sits every Thursday in the county courthouse for civil matters. I've been in front of him twice before on supply contract disputes. He's fair, he's strict, and he does not like his time wasted. She stood. He also has the authority to issue a preliminary injunction against any action Vance might take against the Copper Bell while the federal investigation is pending. You want a local injunction to run parallel to the federal review, Cole said. I want every layer of legal protection this case can carry, she said. Federal review stops the corridor filing. A territorial judge's preservation order stops the county records from being touched. A local injunction stops Vance from taking any direct action against my property. She looked at him steadily. 3 walls. If he comes through one, the other 2 hold. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You've been planning this since the first night. I've been planning it since I read the date on the promissory note and knew it was forged, she said. I just needed the evidence to match the architecture. She got her coat. She got her documents organized, indexed, every page numbered, and cross-referenced in the manner of someone who knew exactly what a judge expected to receive, and had never once made a judge search for a citation that should have been clearly marked. Margaret Ellery was at the breakfast table in the back, her written timeline, complete 12 pages of meticulous narrative in a hand that was, as she had said, better than her husband's. Nora read the first page standing. This is good, Margaret, she said. This is very good. Will it help? Margaret said. It establishes the pattern in the judge's mind before the federal investigator ever sets foot in town, Nora said. Yes, it helps. Margaret folded her hands around her coffee cup. My husband said we'd never see justice for Mesa Verde, she said. He said men like Vance were too connected, too established. She looked at Nora. He wasn't wrong about most of the world. He just hadn't met the right woman yet. Nora held that. She thought about Thomas, who had called her precision her best quality. She thought about Del Harmon, who had died in the winter after losing everything. She thought about the 40 men in a silent saloon and a hand around her throat, and the specific decision she had made in that moment to not look away. Come to the hearing, Nora said. Sit in the front row. Margaret stood. I've been waiting 14 months to sit in that room, she said. They went to the courthouse together. Nora Cole. Dot Abel with his bandaged hand. Margaret Ellery with her 12 pages, and Ruth Carey, who had closed her seamstress shop for the morning and arrived at the courthouse steps already waiting, her jaw set, and her deed papers under her arm. Hector Dumas was there too. He had brought 2 other business owners from the block who had not signed the co-complaint, but had heard what happened in the saloon the previous night, and had apparently spent the intervening hours making decisions. 8 people on the courthouse steps. Not a mob, not a movement. Just people with documentation and the specific determination of those who have done the arithmetic and decided that standing up is the more survivable option. Judge Emmett Crane was a lean man in his 60s, with the compressed energy of someone who had spent 40 years making decisions and had become efficient about it. He came into the courtroom without ceremony, sat down, looked at the room and said, Mrs. Carter, I see you've brought company. I have, Your Honor, she said, and documents. A substantial number, she said. He looked at the stack she set on the table before her. He looked at the folder Cole placed beside it. He looked at the people filling the bench seats behind her, and at Harold Vance's lawyer, a man named Carlton Cross, who had ridden from Colton Creek at some point in the previous 12 hours, and who now sat at the opposing table with his own documents, and the carefully assembled expression of a man who had been handed a difficult assignment and intended to be professional about it. Mr. Cross, Judge Crane said, your client is not present. Mr. Vance sends his apologies. Your Honor, he can send his apologies in writing, Crane said. We're proceeding. He looked at Nora. Mrs. Carter, you've requested a preliminary injunction against actions affecting the property at the Copper Bell Saloon address. State your grounds. She stood. She had been standing in front of difficult men her entire adult life. Supply vendors who didn't want to negotiate with a woman, county officials who spoke past her to the men in the room, customers who tested the limits of what she would tolerate. She had learned that the most powerful thing she could do in any of those moments was not to perform authority, but to simply exercise it quietly and completely, the way a person exercises any skill they have spent years acquiring. She spoke for 22 minutes. She presented the forged promissory note and its typographic and date inconsistencies. She presented the state filing receipt establishing prior and legitimate ownership. She presented the federal fraud complaint with its 11 pages of source documentation. She presented the Mesa Verde pattern evidence from Margaret Ellery's ledger and Margaret's own written timeline. She presented the federal corridor filing she and Cole had obtained in Colton Creek, showing Vance had claimed ownership of her property in a federal office before he had even approached her for a signature. She presented Clara's signed declaration regarding the sealed envelopes in the county clerk's back office. She presented the telegraph records linking Gerald Potts to Meridian Land Partners. She presented the statements from Dumas Carey and the additional business owners. She presented them in order. Every claim sourced, every citation numbered, every document cross-referenced. When she finished, the courtroom was very quiet. Judge Crane looked at the stack of materials on his table for a long moment. He looked at Carlton Cross. "Mr. Cross," he said. Response. Cross stood. He was good, Nora gave him that. He was composed and methodical, and he made 3 arguments in succession: that the county court lacked jurisdiction over a federal filing matter, that the promissory note's validity was a question for a full trial rather than a preliminary hearing, and that the documents from Mesa Verde constituted hearsay evidence inadmissible in a territorial proceeding. He was good. He was also building a defense out of procedural objections, which meant the substantive facts were not available to him as a defense. Nora stood when Crane looked at her. "Your Honor," she said, "the jurisdiction question is accurate. In one respect, the federal filing is under federal review, not this court's purview. However, the injunction I am requesting is not against the federal filing. It is against any physical, administrative, or legal action directed at my property in Redstone Flats while that federal review is pending. This court has full authority to grant that injunction under territorial law." She cited the statute. She cited the case precedent. She sat down. Crane looked at Cross. Cross had nothing. He knew he had nothing. He adjusted his papers and said, "The defense reserves its substantive arguments for the federal proceeding," which was a lawyer's way of saying, "We're going to lose this one." Crane looked at the documents one more time. He looked at the room, the people who had come with Nora, the empty chair at Vance's table, the stack of evidence that had been assembled by a woman who had not slept properly in 4 days and showed none of it. He said, "The preliminary injunction is granted." He said it the way he said everything, without drama, with the flat authority of a man who had been in this chair long enough to know that the drama belonged to the parties, not the judge. Then he said something Nora had not expected. He said, "I am also referring this matter to the Territorial Attorney General's office for review of potential criminal conduct by a county official based on the evidence presented regarding the Redstone Flats County Clerk's office." He looked at Nora over the top of his papers. "Mrs. Carter, your documentation is thorough. I don't say that often." She said, "Thank you, Your Honor." She sat down. Behind her, she heard Hector Dumas exhale. She heard Ruth Carey make a small sound. She heard from the far end of the bench Margaret Ellery sit very straight and very still, in the way of a woman who is holding something enormous inside herself and intends to hold it correctly until she is somewhere private. Carlton Cross gathered his papers and left without speaking to anyone, which was the right professional choice, and also the only one available to him. The courtroom emptied. In the street outside, the morning had gotten on with itself, wagons moving shops, open the ordinary commerce of a Thursday in a small frontier town. Nora stood on the courthouse steps and breathed the outside air and felt the injunction order in her hand, signed, stamped official. Cole came to stand beside her. Not close, not performing anything. Just beside her the way he had been beside her for 4 days present, without intruding, constant, without demanding. The preliminary injunction covers the building, she said. Any attempt to seize, encumber, or transfer the property while the federal review is pending is now a violation of a court order. She looked at the paper. He'd have to be willing to commit open contempt of court in front of a federal investigation to touch the copper bell. Is he? Cole said. No, she said. He's not. Men like Vance are brave with judges who can be managed and clerks who can be paid. They are not brave with federal investigators and court orders and a room full of witnesses. She folded the order. He's going to lawyer up and delay and try to negotiate a settlement from a position of strength he no longer has. And he's going to fail. She looked at the town. The main street of Redstone Flats, which she had walked every day for 11 years, looked the same as it always had. Boards and dust and horses and the particular unlovely functionality of a working frontier town. But something in the air was different. She could feel it the way you feel a weather change before you see it. Word had moved fast the way it always did. People were looking at the courthouse steps, looking at her having conversations she could not hear, but could read from posture and gesture, and the way that groups of people rearrange themselves when the balance of something has shifted. Dumas came down the steps and stopped in front of her. He put his hand out. She shook it. That was something, Mrs. Carter, he said. Thank you for signing the complaint, Mr. Dumas, she said. It mattered. He nodded. He was a man of few words when words felt small, and right now, apparently they did. He went back to his store. Ruth Carey squeezed her arm once brief and warm and followed him. Margaret Ellery was the last. She stood on the step below Nora and looked up at her with the full weight of 14 months of loss and the specific lightness of a woman who has just watched the thing that destroyed her be named and held accountable in an official room by a man in a judge's chair. What happens now? Margaret said. For us, for Mesa Verde. The federal investigator will take your testimony when he arrives, Nora said. The pattern evidence in your ledger connects Vance's Mesa Verde scheme to the Redstone Flats scheme as part of the same organized fraud. That means the investigation covers both. She paused. You won't get your land back, Margaret. I can't promise you that. What's done in a county court 14 months ago is done. But the people who took it, Vance the railroad, anyone who filed fraudulent documents in your county, they will face federal scrutiny for it. Margaret was quiet. She looked at the street. My husband didn't believe it could happen, she said. Your husband didn't have your ledger, Nora said, and he didn't have 14 months of you keeping it. Margaret's composure broke finally, in the small and private way that composure breaks in people who have held it for a very long time, not dramatically. Just a tremor at the jaw, a brightness in the eyes that was not quite tears, but was adjacent to them. She breathed through it. She straightened. I'm going to stay until the marshal arrives, she said. If that's all right. You have a room upstairs as long as you need it, Nora said. They walked back to the Copper Bell together. The federal deputy marshal arrived at 4:15 that afternoon. He was younger than Nora had expected, 30 maybe, with the compact efficiency of someone trained to cover ground quickly and read situations accurately. His name was Deputy Harlan Voss, and he arrived not with drama, but with the quiet purposefulness of federal authority that doesn't need to announce itself. He came to the Copper Bell first, which told Nora that he had done his preliminary reading and understood where the center of this case lived. She gave him coffee. She gave him the full document file, indexed, organized, everything numbered and cross-referenced. She gave him Margaret's timeline and Clara's signed declaration, and the telegraph records, and the copy of the federal corridor filing, and the injunction order from that morning. He read with the focused silence of a man who was doing mathematics. After 40 minutes, he looked up. Mrs. Carter, he said. This is the most organized private evidence file I have ever received in 5 years of federal investigation work. I keep good records, she said. You built a federal case from a saloon office in 4 days, he said, with no legal training. I have legal books, she said, and I read them. She looked at him steadily. My husband always said I was better at the books than he was. He was right. Voss closed the folder. I'm going to the county clerk's office tonight, he said, with the preservation order and my federal credentials. Those 5 envelopes are going into federal custody before morning. Mr. Potts will cooperate, or he will be taken into federal custody himself, Voss said without heat as a statement of operational fact. That's how this works. He stood. He picked up the file. I'll need to speak with Harold Vance. He's in the land office building 3 blocks north, she said. Or he was. He may have. He's still in town, Cole said from the end of the bar. Voss looked at Cole. Cole looked back. You're Maddox, Voss said. Something moved in Cole's face. I am. I've heard your name, Voss said. It was not a threat. It was not an accusation. It was information stated plainly. From where? Cole said. The Mesa Verde investigation, Voss said. Opened 6 months ago, closed for lack of evidence. Your name appeared in witness statements as someone who had been present in the area during the relevant period. The room was very quiet. I wasn't working for Vance, Cole said. I didn't say you were, Voss said. I said your name appeared. He looked at him for a moment. You found the federal corridor filing in Colton Creek. I did. You rode 3 hours in the dark to file it. I did. Voss was quiet. That kind of work goes on the right side of a ledger, he said. In my experience. He picked up his hat. He looked at Nora. I'll be back in the morning with an update on Potts and Vance. Don't go anywhere. I run a saloon, she said. I'm always here. He left. The door swung shut and the room exhaled, and Cole sat at the bar with his coffee, and Nora stood across from him, and they looked at each other in the specific way of 2 people who have been through something together that neither of them is ready to name out loud yet. The right side of the ledger, Cole said. You heard him, she said. I heard him. He looked at his cup. Dell would have. He stopped. I know, she said. He looked up at her. How do you do that? Do what? Finish sentences I haven't started, he said. She thought about it. I've been reading people for 11 years from behind that bar, she said. You learn to hear what's in the pause. She poured him fresh coffee. Dell would have been glad to know it ended differently this time. That's what you were going to say. He held the cup. He did not say anything for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was level and quiet, and carried more weight than most voices do. When I rode into Redstone Flats, he said, I didn't think it was going to go this way. I've seen Vance's work. I've seen what he does to people who stand up. He looked at her. I didn't expect to find you. What did you expect? She said. Another town that was going to lose, he said. She looked at him across the bar, the width of the worn hardwood between them, the lamp burning low in the afternoon light. She thought about what she was going to say, and decided to say it the way she said everything directly, without softening it beyond what it actually was. You stayed, she said, when you didn't have to, when it would have been easier and safer to ride on. She set the coffee pot down. That matters, Cole. Whatever comes next, the investigation, the marshal's office, whatever you're working out in your own mind about your name in those witness statements, that stays true. You stayed, and it mattered. He held that. He held it the way he held everything carefully, without pretending it weighed less than it did. The hearing, he said. When Crane ruled, you didn't. He stopped. You didn't celebrate. You went straight to the next thing. The marshal, the documents, the briefing. You didn't stop. The work wasn't finished, she said. Is it finished now? He said. She thought about it honestly. The building is protected, she said. The investigation is running. The evidence is in federal custody by morning. Vance's corridor filing is suspended, and his lawyer has nothing to work with. She looked at the bar at the saloon around her, the chairs and the tables, and the piano that Abel played with 2 fingers, and the worn hardwood floor that had held this room together through 11 years of everything. It's not finished, but the part where it could have gone wrong for me, that part is done. "Then stop for 5 minutes," he said. "You've earned 5 minutes." She looked at him. Something in her face did what it rarely did. It softened not into weakness, but into the specific softness of a person allowing themselves to be seen by someone they have decided is worth being seen by. She came around the bar. She sat on the stool beside him, not close enough to perform anything close enough that the distance was a choice, rather than a default. 5 minutes, she said. He nodded. They sat in the quiet of the late afternoon saloon, the light going amber and low, the town outside settling toward evening, the sounds of the copper bell doing what it had always done, existing, functioning, holding itself together through the particular stubbornness of a thing built correctly by people who meant it. After a while, she said, "My husband used to sit at this bar after close. Just sit. He said it was the best time of day. Everything quiet, everything done, nothing left to prove." "He sounds like he understood something," Cole said. "He understood a lot of things," she said. "He was wrong about the lawyer, but he was right about most of the rest." She looked at the front windows, the light in them. "I missed him more in the last 4 days than I have in a long time. Which is strange because I wasn't thinking about him. I was working." "You were doing what he knew you could do," Cole said. "Maybe that's when you feel people most, when you become what they believed you were." She was quiet for a long moment. "That's true," she said. "That's exactly true." The 5 minutes stretched to 10, to 20, to the comfortable, unmeasured length of two people who have stopped counting for a little while. The saloon began filling for the evening. Dot moved through the room with the unhurried competence of someone who has everything under control. Abel played the piano, both hands this time, a real song, not the two-finger waltz, but something with melody and intention. The copper bell opened for the night the way it had opened every night for 11 years. Harold Vance left Redstone Flats the following morning. Not in the night that would have looked like running, and Vance had spent 30 years building the reputation of a man who did not run. He left in the early morning before many people were awake with 2 trunks loaded into a rented wagon, and Carlton Cross riding beside him, in the quiet way of lawyers, accompanying clients who have run out of strategies. Deputy Marshal Voss watched him go from the end of the street. He noted the time in his report. He did not stop him. A man under federal investigation was permitted to relocate. He was not permitted to disappear, and Vance had nowhere to disappear till the investigation followed him like a ledger that balanced. Gerald Potts resigned his position as county clerk by written notice the same morning. The 5 sealed envelopes were in federal custody by 8 o'clock, transferred without incident, logged and catalogued by Deputy Voss with the methodical precision of a man who understood that the integrity of the chain of custody was everything. Nora heard about Vance leaving from Dumas, who heard it from the livery owner who had rented him the wagon. She was at her desk when the news came, working on the quarterly supply ledger, because the copper bell had bills due, regardless of what the week had contained. She set the pen down. She sat for a moment. She thought about a man who had looked at her building and decided it was already his, who had sent a man to put his hand around her throat in front of 40 witnesses and had believed with the full confidence of someone who had done this before and one that she would break. She thought about what he had not known, what he had failed to calculate, that she had spent 11 years building something. Not just the saloon, the knowledge to defend it. The records, the receipts, the filing dates, the legal digests, the habit of documentation that Thomas had called precision, and she had always understood to be survival. That survival, prepared for, did not look like what men like Vance expected it to look like. It did not look like desperation. It did not look like a woman under pressure making a desperate move. It looked like 11 pages of sourced and numbered evidence delivered to a federal land office at 2:40 in the morning. It looked exactly like this. She picked up the pen. She went back to the ledger. Cole found her there an hour later. He knocked on the door frame the way he had started doing, not announcing himself as a stranger, but acknowledging that it was her room. "Voss says the county records are secure," he said. "The 5 envelopes contain supplementary deed filings, all forged, all bearing Potts's certification. That's 5 counts of fraudulent certification of public records in addition to the corridor filing fraud. He paused. He also said the railroad company has already contacted the marshal's office to distance themselves from Vance's filing methods. They're cooperating with the investigation. Of course they are, she said. She did not look up from the ledger. Railroad boards and shareholders. Exactly what I said. You said paperwork has edges, he said. And railroads have lawyers who panic, she said. Same principle. She made a notation. She looked up. Are you leaving? The question landed clean and direct the way all her questions did. He was quiet for a moment. He stood in the doorway with one hand on the frame and the other at his side, and he looked at her with the full, unguarded attention of someone who has stopped pretending that what he's looking at is something he can walk away from easily. I don't have a reason to leave, he said. That's not the same as having a reason to stay, she said. No, he said. It's not. He came in. He sat in the chair across from her desk, the one Margaret Ellery had used for her declaration, the one Cole himself had used the first night when he'd read the forged document. He sat in it like a man who had decided the chair was his for now. I'd like to stay. If you can use me. I can always use someone who knows which way Vance is likely to cut, she said. And the investigation will need people who understand the pattern. Voss will want to talk to you. I know, he said. Is that a problem? No, he said. I decided it wasn't a problem when you wrote the complaint. He looked at her. I've been running from the shadow of Vance's work for 2 years. Staying visible in a case that goes federal, that's not a risk. That's the end of the shadow. She looked at him for a moment. She thought about what he had said on the courthouse steps about Del Harmon, and what he had not said, but she had heard anyway, the specific loneliness of a man who has been chasing a justice he couldn't reach alone. She thought about what it meant to be found at this point in your life by someone who moved at the same speed you moved and asked questions that expected real answers. She thought about Thomas, who had been dead 3 years and 4 months, and who would have liked Cole Maddox. She thought not, because Cole was like him, but because Thomas had always respected people who did not waste words. There's a position available, she said. Not salaried yet. But the investigation will generate legal fees and the injunction needs monitoring, and I expect Voss will need a local contact for the ongoing case. She picked up her pen. It's not heroic work. I'm not interested in heroic work, he said. It's documentation, she said. Records, coordination, making sure the right information gets to the right office at the right time. She looked at him. It's what won this case. I know what won this case, he said. I watched you build it. She looked back at her ledger. She made another notation. Be at the bar when Voss comes at noon, she said. He'll want your account of the Colton Creek filing and your knowledge of the Mesa Verde connection. I'll be there, he said. He did not leave. He sat in the chair. She worked. After a few minutes, she said without looking up, the coffee's on the stove. He got up and got coffee and came back and sat down. And the room was quiet, with the good and particular quiet of two people who do not need to fill silence because the silence is not empty. The copper bell rang that Thursday evening, the way it ran every evening with exactness and care, with Dot managing the floor, and Abel finding his way through a full song on the piano with the ordinary population of Redstone Flats, coming through the door and sitting at the tables and drinking and talking and doing the quiet social work of people who live in the same place together. But something had changed in the room, not dramatically, not with announcement. People looked at Nora differently, not with pity, not with the sideways look of a town that has watched someone barely survive, but with the specific regard that communities reserve for people who have done something publicly difficult and come through it correctly. Dumas nodded when he came in a real nod, the kind that means something. Two men who had stood up in the saloon the previous night when Knox came in stopped at the bar and paid their tabs, which they had been running for 3 weeks without being asked. Small things. True things. Ruth Carey came in at 7 and sat at the bar and ordered tea, which they made when asked, and said to Nora, I got a letter from my sister in Denver. She says there's nothing like this there. No copper bell. Tell her to visit, Nora said. I might, Ruth said. She drank her tea. I closed the shop for this morning and I thought I'd lose customers. I didn't lose a single one. She looked at Nora. I think they were glad I closed it. Nora thought about what it meant to show a town that a woman could hold a legal case together against the most powerful man in the county and win. Not just for herself, for the arithmetic of what people believed was possible. For the next woman who was handed a fraudulent document and told to sign. For the next business owner who was approached with an offer that was a threat and a suit. She thought about the county clerk position that was now vacant. She thought about the record system that needed reconstruction and correction. She thought about the business owners who had been afraid and were slightly less afraid tonight. She thought about Margaret Ellery, who was upstairs right now writing a letter to her husband's family in Mesa Verde to tell them that the name Meridian Land Partners was now part of a federal criminal investigation and that the man who had taken everything they had was answering for it. At 10 o'clock, when the room was winding down, Cole came and leaned against the bar from the customer side, and she came and leaned against it from hers, and they were close enough now that the distance was less about furniture and more about choice, and the choice was getting smaller. Voss wants the full briefing tomorrow at 8, he said. He said he wants you there. I'll be there, she said. He also said, Cole paused. He had a look on his face she hadn't seen before, something that was all the way open. He said, and I'm quoting directly, that in 20 years of territorial law work, he has never seen a private individual build a cleaner case with less institutional support. He looked at her. He said you'd have made a hell of a lawyer. She thought about that. I still might, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said quietly, Yeah, you might. She looked around the Copper Bell. The room her husband had helped her buy, the property Harold Vance had decided was already his. The building that had been the site of the worst thing that had happened to her in Redstone Flats, and the foundation of everything she had built since. It was the same 4 walls, and the same worn floor, and the same piano, and the same lamp over the bar. But the record was corrected now. Filed, certified, witnessed, protected by a federal preservation order, and a territorial injunction, and an investigation that had reached further than Vance had ever imagined it would go. She had not been powerless. She had never been powerless. She had been unacknowledged. And there was a difference. A difference she had understood in the bone-deep and permanent way you understand things that cost you something real to learn. Because once the record is written correctly with evidence and sourced citations and the signatures of witnesses who chose to stand instead of look away, it cannot be unwritten. No forged note can erase it. No man's hand around your throat can silence it. No silence in a room full of people who chose not to see can unmake what is documented, stamped, filed, and true. Nora Carter set both hands on the bar of the Copper Bell Saloon and looked at what she had built, and what she had kept, and what she had proven, and she understood clearly and finally, and without any remaining question, that the Copper Bell was hers. It had always been hers, and now the record said so.